He has a secret. He can deal huge damage to a monster with just one hit. A powerful weapon. His grimoire contains notes on imbalance magic. It has accessories that increase your bonuses along the way. This is a reward that can only be obtained once after defeating the dungeon boss. It is often referred to as a first-time reward, but only he can get it in unlimited quantities. A breathless boy, carrying an excessively large bag, hurried towards a group of players who impatiently shouted reproaches, calling him a blockhead. The young lad guiltily urged himself on, trying to run even faster. The action took place in the dangerous Nopri S-rank dungeon, designed for level 80. With a smirk, one of the players suggested that the boy become bait, while the others watched, laughing. Henri Crit, a first-level newbie, readily and quite loudly replied that he would do his best. One of the players roughly kicked the young man away and, sneering contemptuously, commanded him to use his useless skill, causing him to fall forward painfully. The boy found himself face to face with giant fire monsters, and his useless skill turned out to be dodging. The evasion skill was activated. Thanks to it, the boy was able to nimbly avoid any danger and impending threats. Evasion allows him to dodge an enemy's attack by temporarily increasing his movement speed. The young man, jumping deftly, dodged the continuous attacks of the formidable monsters, each time shouting the name of his only skill. Evasion! The armored hero and his companions laughed loudly as they watched the boy's desperate attempts to evade the attacks. The boy ran as fast as he could, fleeing from the monsters pursuing him, and the taunts of his tormentors sounded even louder. They encouraged each other with jokes about how he was about to trip. Suddenly, one of the fiery monsters made a high jump and attacked the warrior with a huge axe. The boy, who had barely fallen, looked up and, with great surprise, saw the monster already thrown to the ground. Inspired, the warrior rushed into a furious fight with a battle cry, defeating one monster after another. The young man who remained on the sidelines only watched this exciting battle in amazement. Having won the victory, the warriors rejoiced in their well-deserved reward, extolling their exploits. Having fished a coin out of a pile of gold, one of the warriors maliciously threw it right into the boy's face, cynically calling the coin his share. Having called him a miserable scum, the company moved on. The boy, with despair in his eyes, began to rummage in the grass until he finally found the thrown coin. Bitterly aware of the limitations of his one skill and realizing that with a larger arsenal of skills he could earn much more, the boy looked sadly at his tiny gold coin. Henri returned home, carrying a jar of liquid in his hands, and made it clear that he was already here. His younger sister was waiting for him at home, right in front of the window, where the rays of the setting sun fell. A little girl, Aniray, was lying on a crib with her eyes closed. The boy called her name loudly as he entered the room. Carefully wiping his sister's back with a damp cloth, the boy shared a story about his important role in the treasure hunt. He was grateful to his comrades for the opportunity to stay close despite their rudeness. Having finished washing his little sister, the boy happily told her about his opportunity to receive awards. He carefully brought the medicine to the mouth of his sister, who was lying with her eyes closed, carefully asking her not to spill a drop, because it was very expensive. However, this touching atmosphere was interrupted by an appeal to Anrit. An elegant woman with long hair and glasses, sitting opposite the sick girl, reminded the young man of the daily need to give his sister medicine, without which she would die. Confused, the young man only muttered about the high cost of this medicine. The girl once again emphasized that regular intake of the medicine, according to her instructions, will significantly prolong the girl's life. Looking at his sick little sister, the young man firmly said that he would definitely find the money. The boy was forced to work for Guillermo, despite the difficult conditions, because an ordinary job could not provide the required amount of money. Sitting among his friends and slowly sipping his drink, Guillermo suddenly told the boy that he no longer needed it. The stunned young man tried to find out the reason for such a decision. The fighter glanced at the boy's injured arm and explained that with such an injury he would no longer be able to perform the work of a porter. The boy tried to justify himself by saying that the last time the luggage was heavier than usual, and he hadn't managed to dodge the sudden attack, injuring his arm. However, despite the pain, he had done his job. After an unexpected and deafening punch to the face, the young guy was thrown far back with force, behind the nearest neighboring table, where he fell heavily. The menacing, muscular, and self-confident fighter, with an arrogant look, haughtily declared that he would not repeat what he had said a second time, After these words, the young man, with timidity and timid hope in his voice, asked the team to take him in. Turning to a dark-haired and serious guy who was sitting quietly at the next table, the boy suddenly introduced himself loudly and, without thinking, dropped to his knees and offered his services as a porter. The surprised and slightly confused guy, noticing a large bruise and swelling under the young man's eye, worriedly asked if everything was okay with him, to which he stubbornly replied that such trifles would not stop him at all. The boy continued to bow and, with desperate persistence, continued to beg the guy to agree, while he thoughtfully chose the right words and suddenly felt the stern and threatening gaze of the fighter sitting directly opposite him. Standing up abruptly, menacingly and imperiously, and finding himself right behind the boy, the fighter addressed him in a hoarse voice with a cold question. "Does he remember his name?" And then, as if on command, everyone in the noisy and crowded bar shouted out that the boy's name was a level 1 prisoner, and then burst into loud, humiliating laughter. All the visitors around him kept mocking him, rudely reminding him that he couldn't even defeat a single weak monster, contemptuously calling him useless trash that wouldn't do even 10 damage. Guillermo, not hiding his grin, loudly added that no one in their right mind would want to take him on their team. He threw the boy out of the bar in a rage and ordered him never to show his face there again, adding that he would not be surprised if he saw him dead and dumped in a dirty ditch one day. Depressed, completely desperate and devastated, the boy thought with anguish in his soul about what he should do if he could not earn enough money to buy medicine for his sick sister. Rising to his feet with difficulty, despite the excruciating pain and broken arm, the young man weakly muttered under his breath that, no matter what, he would not give up and would continue to fight. Watching drunken passers-by indulging in a night of revelry, the young man feverishly went over possible solutions in his head. There was a catastrophic shortage of money for medicine, and everything valuable in the house, including his father's memorable gift, had long since been pawned. Having tightly bandaged his injured arm, the young man attached a small dagger to his belt. He began to consider what options he had now. The thought of killing the monster and selling the loot flashed through his mind, but he immediately realized that he couldn't do it alone. And, deciding that if he had any chance, it was only here, he stopped deep in the forest. He stopped in front of the entrance to a dungeon for beginning adventurers called Fassel's Dungeon. Having gone deeper into the dungeon, the young man was struck by the eerie atmosphere that reigned there. He had already turned around, but then suddenly stepped back, noticing a large, angry beast, a kobold. And even though the 4th level was recommended at the very beginning of this path, clutching his small wooden-handled dagger, he mentally turned to his father for help. Boldly and unexpectedly, the young man jumped out of hiding right in front of the kobold's nose. The huge, angry kobold growled furiously and rushed at him. Having deftly jumped over the attacking beast, the young man, gasping for breath, darted behind the wall, hoping that the kobold had lost sight of him. Thinking that what he needed might be here, he opened the chest he found. Having opened the chest, the young man was very happy to discover a rare antidote plant, and immediately began to mentally calculate how much he could get for this valuable find, realizing that the amount he got would still not be enough. Inspired by the thought that he would have no trouble escaping from the monsters here, he felt a surge of confidence in his abilities. Opening chest after chest, the young man was disappointed to find that they were all empty. No matter how desperately he prayed for at least some find, he began to be overcome by disturbing thoughts that the first visitors to the dungeon had already taken everything of value. Having reached the huge gate, the young man exclaimed bitterly that he had searched everything up to the boss's room. Unfolding the map with anxiety, the young man thought that he could not return empty-handed, and realized that there was still one place he had not explored. The young man realized that the boss's room was located in the very depths of the dungeon, and behind it there was another place, accessible only to those who could defeat the main monster. It occurred to him that there must certainly be a chest in the Freedom Zone. He remembered that completing the dungeon would reward him with the rarest treasures, which could be sold for huge amounts of money, and that if he wanted to buy the medicine, he had no other choice. Suddenly, a kobold came out from the depths of the corridor towards him. However, looking more closely, the boy saw that behind one seemingly familiar kobold, there was a second one, and behind him 2 more. Surrounded by the howling of a whole pack of animals, the boy, taken by surprise, exclaimed whether there were too many of them. Under the aggressive roar of the animals, the confused boy began to mumble that he had a very good and sweet little sister, who was already too good for him. He helplessly suggested that they have a picnic until his little sister recovered. A pack of animals rushed at the boy with a terrifying roar, but he miraculously managed to dodge. Jumping back, the young man suddenly realized that right behind him was the very same boss room. The boy was thrown back through the gate doors, into the room. He screamed in horror that he was not ready to die yet, as the doors slammed shut, revealing the pack of kobolds. Finding himself in front of the massive closed doors, the young man finally realized that he was inside. Turning around, he immediately noticed that something huge and powerful was approaching him. As the stunned youth looked at the monster towering before him, he remembered that once he entered the boss's room, there would be no turning back. An incredibly loud roar deafened the boy, who found himself trapped in front of the closing doors. A fearsome and ferocious werewolf towered before him, ready to tear apart anyone who stood in his way. The recommended enemy level was 8. The boy thought that since 6 party members were needed, this must be the boss. With trembling hands, he grabbed his small dagger and raised it. The werewolf, bristling his terrifying paws with huge claws, prepared to tear the boy to pieces. The young man standing opposite him understood that he had no chance against this monster. Breathing heavily, the boy kept telling himself that he would definitely survive, even alone. The first thing the boy decided to do was to try to dodge the werewolf's blows. With each dodge, the boy realized more and more clearly that any missed attack of the werewolf would be fatal for him. At that moment, the fierce werewolf decided to attack with both paws at the same time. The boy deftly jumped from one blow of the werewolf to another. The boy's main task was to avoid being hit, because if he didn't expose himself to the blow, he would have a chance to dodge. But suddenly, the werewolf increased his speed sharply, and his paw was too fast for the boy to react. However, thanks to his quick reaction, the boy managed to jump over this unexpected attack. Another swift, unprepared blow followed, but he managed to dodge it too. To the werewolf's furious roar, the boy boldly declared that he had a good reaction and could see each of his attacks, which would, one after another, go out of the monster's focus. Gradually, the boy began to anticipate the werewolf's movements. If he swings, it's enough to simply jump to the side of the hit zone. If it extends both paws, you need to dodge to get out of attack range. Before a massive strike, you need to gain distance after attacking with 2 paws. If he stands on his front paws, you should immediately use dodge. The werewolf stretched out his huge paws, and the boy realized that the most important thing now was to concentrate as much as possible. This meant that it was necessary to use dodge to get out of the kill zone. The boy noted that the werewolf did not always attack with both paws during his massive attack. In this case, you just need to gain extra distance. If he stands on his front paws, you should immediately use dodge. As long as he's focused, the werewolf can't get to him. When the werewolf found himself close to the wall, leaving himself no room to maneuver, the boy had the opportunity to attack him from behind. With a battle cry, reminding himself that his little sister was waiting for him at home, the boy, gathering all his courage, raised his dagger to the werewolf. However, the boy's strike was only 10 units strong. His dagger thrust seemed like nothing more than a pitiful jab to the werewolf. Having used up all his strength, the boy did not expect at all that his attack would not cause any harm to the werewolf. In tears of complete despair and on the verge of hysteria, the boy unsuccessfully and with desperate determination tried to at least slightly pierce the thick skin of the ferocious werewolf and inflict at least 1 single unit of damage, even the most insignificant. Looking at the predatory, malicious grin of the bloodthirsty werewolf, the boy thought that if he had managed to inflict damage on the beast even once, even minimally, he would not have stopped and would have continued to attack with his dagger until he could finally defeat it. But with 0 damage, he had absolutely no chance of success. To his great regret, the werewolf grabbed the boy's head with terrible force, like a doll, and lifted him high above the ground without a drop of pity for him. Cursing with rage his insignificant strength and weak blow, the boy tried with desperation and anger to plunge his dagger into the werewolf's flesh, but he could not break free from his iron grip, which seemed to be squeezing his skull until it cracked. Hanging limply in the air, the boy suddenly shouted that he was able to predict every attack and movement of the werewolf in advance, dodge them thanks to his skill, but no matter how hard he tried, He would never be able to defeat such a monster. As he prepared to cower before the final, fatal blow of fate, the boy began to mentally ask his sister for forgiveness, for his insignificant weakness, for his inability to protect her, for the fact that he possessed only one, almost useless skill of evasion. For the last time, he raised his only weapon with his free hand with effort. The werewolf clutched the remains of the dagger in his fingers and broke it in half with monstrous force, after which he threw the boy high into the air with terrifying ease, like an unwanted doll, not paying attention to his helplessness. Clinging to the last remaining moments of life, the boy watched in flight with pain in his heart, as the knife once given to him by his father shattered into tiny pieces. Flying through the air, he realized with bitterness that although the gift was with him until the end, his father himself died in this sinister dungeon. In his shocked mind, bright, warm, and kindly joyful memories of those happy moments when he was with his little sister flashed. Overwhelmed with guilt, he mentally apologized to her, rapidly approaching the ground in a fatal fall. But suddenly and unexpectedly, the face of his sister appeared in his mind, bright and distinct, and with incredible and almost superhuman strength, she screamed his name, as if trying to pull him back to life. The boy suddenly seemed to wake up from nothingness. He abruptly opened his eyes, amazed that right in front of him there appeared a living, almost tangible image of his sister. He could not understand whether it was a vision, a dream, or a miracle, or whether he had imagined it. However, he was flying straight towards the wall and knew that the collision would be fatal. Gathering his last strength, he instinctively used his dodge skill again. Without realizing it, the boy suddenly walked through the wall. Continuing to defend himself automatically, he put his hands out in front of him, as if trying to block an invisible obstacle. Falling onto the cold floor, the boy turned around, trying to comprehend what had happened. For a moment, it seemed to him that he had crashed into a wall. Turning around, the boy saw the chest and couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him lay the Sword of the Traveler, a reward for completing the Dungeon of Facile. The boy thought that if he sold this sword, the money he got might be enough to buy medicine for his sister. Looking around, the boy recognized the room. It was the reward zone. However, the boy still couldn't understand how he slipped through the wall without killing the boss. And then the boy suddenly remembered all the ridicule and humiliation he had previously suffered because of his useless dodging skill. And yet, despite everything, he was able to get a reward for completing the dungeon. The boy thought with a slight hope that perhaps his dodging skill was not as useless as he had previously thought, and with determination, he gripped the sword tighter in his hands, which were trembling with excitement. The boy thought with joy and relief that he had finally managed to return safe and sound, looking at the lively, noisy city of adventurers named Garibos. The huge number of diverse and dangerous dungeons in the vicinity of Garibos invariably attracted unruly and violent crowds of brave adventurers, turning it into a real epicenter of life and a city of seekers of incredible adventures. In Garibos, as in many other crowded places where the most powerful and influential representatives of the world gathered, the decisive and main role was played exclusively by force, power, and big money. In this noisy city, where business was rapidly developing and flourishing due to the needs of adventurers, the owner of a small stall looked at the boy with suspicion and distrust, and took him for a petty thief. The boy, without embarrassment, showed his old but still reliable sword, and calmly said that he would like to sell it for a reasonable price. The stall owner took the traveler's sword from the boy's hands with interest, and began to examine it carefully with surprise. At that time, the boy mentally prayed to all the gods to value the weapon at least at 5,000 rings, an amount that should be enough for the much-needed medicine for his little sister. Ells for the sword. And the boy calculated in his mind with amazement that for that kind of money he could buy 6 whole jars of the necessary medicine. The boy, without wasting a second, rushed headlong towards their house and, running inside, from the threshold with a joyful cry, informed his sister that he had finally brought the treasured medicine. He remembered well that without daily medication his sister was in imminent danger of death, and with gratitude in his heart he handed her the treasured jar. Calmly and peacefully he began to share with her the story of how he had managed to obtain the necessary remedy on his own. The boy was suddenly overwhelmed by warm memories of how his sister had always supported him, convincing him that she knew better than anyone how hard he was trying. But now he clearly understood that he was no longer the weak boy he had been before. Remembering yesterday's unexpected passage into the reward area using evasion, the boy decided to return to Fasol's dungeon, hoping to learn how to freely use this skill in order to provide his sister with medicine every day. The boy decided to start by using dodging again in front of that very wall. But no matter how hard the boy tried, he couldn't get through the wall. And then the boy remembered that he had slipped through the wall precisely after the werewolf had thrown him into it with force. The boy thought that he needed a strong impulse to jump, and, without wasting time, he quickly ran straight to the wall, deftly accelerating to a speed of 150 units. But unfortunately, he crashed into it with noisy results. Having somersaulted backwards over his shoulder in an attempt to soften his fall, the boy again, unsuccessfully and helplessly, hit the hard wall, not understanding why it remained insurmountable. Quite unexpectedly, the boy ran into a group of familiar residents of his hometown, who, as it turned out, also ended up in this strange dungeon. At first, they were genuinely surprised by his presence, and then, remembering his offensive nickname, Prisoner of the First Level, they simply laughed loudly at him. The young adventurer stood motionless in front of the mysterious wall and could not understand how he had managed to pass through it last time, as if it were an illusion. Desperate and not knowing what else to do, the boy decided to open the massive gates again, in the hope of completely and accurately reproducing all the events that happened to him yesterday, down to the smallest details. For a brief moment, the boy was overcome by a strong fear of imminent death, because if he failed the test, then this deadly battle could well be his last in life. But despite this, he still continued on his way with determination, realizing that he had only one chance to save himself, and not wanting to give up under any circumstances. The boy resolutely stood right in front of the huge werewolf, clutching his only weapon, a knife, in his trembling hand. The boy clearly and distinctly remembered all of his dodges from yesterday, and with extreme dexterity and attention, avoided the powerful blows of the terrible monster, moving almost intuitively. He thought that if he tried to attack the werewolf again at the very moment when he became vulnerable, he would most likely be thrown back with force against the wall again, just like what happened yesterday. The werewolf, not giving him a chance, easily broke his knife again, and then threw the boy towards the wall with monstrous force. Flying through the air, the young man desperately prayed that he would be able to pass through the wall again. Clenching his hands in front of his head in a defensive gesture, the boy flew through the wall at great speed and suddenly found himself in exactly the same room where he had been yesterday. And then he suddenly realized that the secret to passing through the wall was precisely in dodging the blow. He was very happy that he could now get into the reward zone without even defeating the boss. However, the boy remembered that the rare reward for completing the dungeon could only be obtained once. Having resigned himself to the thought that he would never receive such a generous reward as the first time, the boy began to open the chest. To the boy's great surprise, the chest again contained the traveler's sword, and soon he was already receiving the same 30,000 Ls from the stall owner in exchange for it. The stern look of the stall owner made the boy feel that he was clearly suspicious of something when he handed him the, quote, traveler's sword. But the stall owner's menacing look suddenly changed to a smile. He thought that there was probably a small chance to get the traveler's sword again. The stall owner kindly patted the boy on the back and said that he loved the kids who brought him such good things to sell, which surprised the young man quite a bit. The stunned youth told his sick sister about how much money he had managed to earn, and joyfully counted his coins over and over again. And just as the boy began to dream about what he would spend the money he had earned on, he immediately stopped himself, deciding that all this could only be done after his little sister recovered. The boy smiled awkwardly, turning the coin over in his hands and thinking that he would hardly be so lucky next time, although he could not fully believe how much he had managed to earn. And time after time, the boy managed to get that very same sword out of the chest, and several times he received 30,000 yells for it. Once again, having pulled the sword out of the chest, the boy was happy with the thought that he could get rich this way, but suddenly wondered if this was connected with the fact that he got into the room without killing the boss. The boy wondered what would happen if his guess was correct, and he could get the reward for completing the dungeon for the first time over and over again. He thought that this world was full of various dungeons, and each of them offered a special reward for the first successful completion. Some dungeons had really valuable rewards hidden away for the first time through, he thought, looking at the sword in his hands in surprise, and wondering if he could really get these treasures without even fighting the boss. He thought about how he hadn't felt so good in a long time, and he couldn't believe that his evasion could hide such opportunities and bring rewards. A timid hope appeared in his heart that he could find medicine for his sister in the dungeons. He thought that selling the sword in the same place again would be too suspicious, and looking around, began to figure out where he could sell his reward this time. Suddenly, someone grabbed the boy by the head, and a familiar voice said that he was probably too carried away by sales, and stealing was not good. It turned out to be Gilmore and his men. And so, lying there completely beaten, the young man attracted the attention of a mysterious stranger. Lying on the cold ground, the boy did not understand why he was being beaten, and no one from the crowd dared to intervene out of fear, only watching this injustice. Mocking the boy's helplessness in obtaining such a reward honestly, Gilmore and his men continued to accuse him of theft. Grinning evilly and hinting at his hidden talents, Gilmore was about to draw his weapon. Grabbing the boy by the hair, he threateningly ordered him to bring everything stolen only to him from now on. After correcting the boy to respond and agree, he swung for another powerful blow. But suddenly, completely unexpectedly, the guards passing by began to pay attention to what was happening. They were about to pass by, but stopped, alerted by the noise and aggression. One of Gilmore's friends, without wasting a second, confidently approached the guards, and reminding them that their leader was one of the big three most influential people in the city, advised them not to interfere, while handing over a heavy bag of coins, as if confirming that in this city, power belongs to those who have money. But as soon as he raised his hand to strike, a mocking and caustic comment from a stranger about his vulgar and smug grin suddenly rang out from the crowd, which instantly riveted the attention of everyone present. A huge bolt of lightning struck him with a deafening crack, immobilizing his body and restricting his movements with powerful, paralyzing energy. And literally immediately, every member of his team was caught and paralyzed by exactly the same lightning strike of the, quote, restraining thunder spell, which worked almost instantly. The same stranger confidently emerged from the crowd, clutching a ruby staff in both hands, a legendary weapon that, according to rumors, drops exclusively in D-ranked dungeons and only with a fantastically low chance. 1 in 10,920. This stranger turned out to be none other than the famous sorceress of the city of Garabos, Orii Schmick, about whom there were many rumors and legends in the city. In a calm and confident voice, the sorceress Garabosa declared that she was going to return the sword to its true owner, and confidently, without the slightest hesitation, took it from the stunned Gilmore. As soon as he opened his mouth to object and declare that the sword belonged to him, the sorceress corrected him, calmly explaining that in fact the sword was the boy's thing and did not belong to anyone else. With a light, almost casual wave of her magic staff over the thunder-bound bandits, the sorceress removed the spell's effect from them and thus freed their bodies from the paralyzing effect. The robbers, having angrily muttered curses and threats towards the sorceress, slowly and reluctantly left the scene of events, casting dark and unkind glances at her from under their brows. Watching the sorceress's confident posture in amazement and thinking about her greatness, the boy noticed how she turned to him, and her stern expression changed to a smile as she returned the sword to him. As soon as the sword was returned to its owner, the sorceress smiled, and asked if he would mind if she kept the sword for herself, leaving the boy amazed. But then the sorceress suddenly approached the boy's face and told him to simply say the word, "return." Slightly confused, the young man asked the sorceress to return the sword, noticing that it belonged to him, and immediately the sword was back in his hands. Endlessly bowing and thanking the sorceress, he was surprised that in this city there were people who thought not only about themselves. Turning around, the sorceress asked the boy if he should learn to fight to protect his little sister. Sitting across from his little sister, he, remembering the words of the sorceress, began to realize that money alone was not enough, and that he really needed to learn to protect her, especially after he had almost had everything he had earned taken away from him today. Standing in front of the notice board, he firmly decided that he would no longer silently give away what belonged to him, and that he would definitely learn to protect his little sister. The reward for completing the Spiral Dungeon will be the Book of Truths. And now in the Spiral Dungeon, the exhausted and wounded female fighter screamed in horror, not wanting to die after they spent so much money on equipment, and fearfully awaited the fatal blow of the ogre. E-Rank Spiral Dungeon. Boss Dark Orc. Recommended level 25. Remembering his previous trips to the dungeons, the boy stood in the shop opposite the clever merchant again, but this time with the intention of buying a shield. The shop owner, boasting of his wide range of shields, proudly pointed the boy to the right section. While the boy was examining the offered shields, the merchant inquired about his next destination, to which the young man replied that he was going to the Spiral Dungeon. The shop owner, amazed by the boy's answer, reminded him that the Spiral Dungeon was designed for E-Rank adventurers. The boy, smiling contentedly, said that he could now afford to buy something, whereas before he had to economize on everything. Still shocked, the shop owner grabbed the boy's face and asked him again if he was in his right mind, and if someone like him could really reach F-Rank. Asking again if the boy really wanted the Book of Truths, the cherished dream of every adventurer, and noticing his determination, the shop owner bent the most expensive shield and declared that such low-quality equipment was not suitable for him. The shop owner gave the boy a special shield, the small Golem shield, with a 10,000 unit durability, saying that even a simple attack from a dark orc would be quite noticeable. He lamented how many people invested in swords and spears, but ended up dying or fleeing due to poor protection, adding that the shield was relatively inexpensive, but still of top-notch quality. However, the inexpensive price tag turned out to be 120,000 yells, but the owner offered a generous discount of 80,000. And now he was standing at the entrance to the dangerous dungeon. Full of fear, the young adventurer nevertheless decided to enter the dungeon. He saw a terrifying picture. A huge evil monster, having bitten off a piece of the head, was throwing another daredevil against the wall. Before him stood a huge, terrifying monster, a dark orc. And so the young adventurer took a fighting stance, holding out his new, expensive shield in front of the deadly monster. And even though the boy was only level 1 and his characteristics left much to be desired, he understood that the main thing now was to concentrate, because his life depended on the reliability of this shield. The huge dark orc had already swung his weapon. To the boy's great relief, the shield actually withstood the powerful blow. He was convinced that the seller had not deceived him. After receiving another extremely powerful blow, the young man, along with his shield, flew straight through the wall, amazed that there was not a single scratch left on the shield. Lying on the ground, the boy looked at the shield with gratitude, and, overcome with joy, began to jump up and down, rejoicing that everything had gone according to plan. The boy, looking at his shield, thought that now, with such a reliable companion, he would not be afraid of any enemy, and from now on the shield would become his faithful partner. And so, talking to his shield as if it were a faithful comrade, the boy approached to show the reward for completing the Spiral Dungeon. Opening the chest, the boy saw in front of him the Book of Truths. Remembering the sorceress's words about the need to become stronger, the boy enthusiastically began to study the Book of Truths in search of ways to increase his strength. And then the boy was overwhelmed by the inspiring thought that he would be able to significantly improve all his characteristics and receive this valuable book an infinite number of times. Another blow, dodging with the shield, and now the second Book of Truths was in the hands of the young man. He was once again convinced that he would be able to receive this award countless times. Standing in front of his sister's bed, the boy finally used the Book of Truths and increased his agility by 10 points, after which he happily shared this news with his little sister. He noted with enthusiasm that thanks to the endless reward, he had become stronger and would be able to protect his little sister. It seemed to him that he had become faster, and was now even more agile in courting her. Thinking about how much he needed to increase his agility to become truly strong, the boy wiped his trusty shield and came to the realization that since he could obtain the Book of Truths an infinite number of times, he would be able to increase his stats many times over. The boy remembered Guillermo and his impressive characteristics, and this helped him make his final decision. Standing with a shield in front of the dark orc again, the boy firmly decided to surpass this monster, at least in terms of agility. Receiving the Book of Truths again and again, the boy increased his dexterity rating to 210 units. Having already used his 14th Book of Truths, the boy was able to significantly increase his characteristics, bringing the overall indicators to 290 units, which gave him a noticeable increase in strength, agility, and endurance. Having collected as many as 10 of these rarest books, the boy deliberately used them all at once to instantly strengthen himself by as much as 100 units. And as soon as he finished, he immediately felt how much more powerful his body had become, how much stronger his muscles had become, and how much faster his body responded to every movement. Today, his agility reached an impressive mark of 390 units, and the boy, lying on the cold floor of the room, looked at the updated characteristics in the status window with joy and pride, unable to hold back the wide smile on his face. He went over his cunning and complex plan in his head over and over again, never forgetting the oath he had once made to himself. He would become strong at any cost, for his sister's sake, for protection, and so that he would never again be considered weak. He stubbornly continued to receive one book of truths after another, day after day, as if according to a well-worn pattern, not allowing himself to rest, because each new book brought him closer to a previously unattainable dream. Each of these books invariably brought real results. With each use, the boy felt himself becoming faster, stronger, more resilient, and his fear of future battles was disappearing. He did not stop, continuing on his way, and eventually reached an impressive figure. Exactly 100 books, obtained through hard work, caution, and cunning, in conditions where others would have long ago given up or been destroyed. He understood perfectly well that he could not tell anyone about his unique ability to walk through walls, because if this secret was revealed, they would start using him as a tool for farming, as a machine for collecting rewards, and then his sister could be in danger, and for the boy, her safety was the most important value, more important than gold, strength, or respect. Quite unexpectedly, on one of the routes, he again met that same sorceress, Garabosa Aurea, Schmick, who once came to his aid and without whose support he might have died. Seeing the young man beaming with joy and an open, enlightened face, the sorceress noted that he began to look much more confident and healthy, and with a smile suggested that he must have increased his level, to which the boy was a little embarrassed, not knowing how to react. When she was about to use magical analysis to evaluate his characteristics, he quickly stopped her, not wanting to give away his secrets. But despite this, her experienced gaze still managed to catch an incredibly high dexterity indicator, and this caused her genuine surprise and many new questions. The boy immediately thanked the sorceress for the fact that it was thanks to her words that he decided to become stronger. She, with a peaceful smile, decided to leave, giving him the opportunity to continue exploring the dungeons, once again leaving the young man under the impression of their meeting. And so, after she said goodbye to him, expressing hope for a new meeting, the sorceress never returned from the dungeon. Standing at a familiar shop, the boy learned from the owner that the sorceress had never returned from her last trip to the D-rank dungeon, Trump's dungeon, and that even the rescue team had encountered serious difficulties. The boy asked the shop owner in confusion, amazed that a whole week had passed since the sorceress had not returned. In response, he heard that this was not surprising, since the recommended level for this dungeon was 50th. Just as the shop owner was about to finish his story about how the dungeon was full of traps, the boy, as if he had broken loose from his chain, ran out of the shop, shouting as he ran that it was time for him to go. The shopkeeper, pondering the boy's chances in a level 50 dungeon, became furious when another customer disparaged him as a first-tier prisoner and broke his sword. The customer derogatorily called the boy a loser who couldn't even handle the first level, which angered the shopkeeper. The boy rushed headlong to Trump's dungeon, where a battle was already unfolding between the monster and the guards, who themselves needed reinforcements. Finding himself in the very center of the battle, the boy saw how the guards were defeated by a powerful blow from the monster. Rushing past the fighting guards and the monster at the speed of light, the boy was determined to get to the sorceress as quickly as possible. However, the boy noticed that, unlike all the previous dungeons, this one turned out to be much more difficult. In the dungeon, he encountered moving traps, typical of D-rank dungeons, which when activated would transport the person caught in the trap to a random point in the location. One of these traps triggered, and he was also transported. At first, the young man tried to navigate using the map, but quickly realized that the map was useless every time he moved to a random place. Throwing it away, he ran on. He ran with special tenacity, because it was for the sake of protecting the people dear to him that he had worked so hard to improve his skills. Shouting the name of the sorceress, he continued to rush forward at breakneck speed. And so, finally, he reached the place where the sorceress sat, bored and hungry, and fell right in front of her. The sorceress looked at him in surprise, and the boy joyfully called her by name. The sorceress asked what he was doing there, and when she learned that he had come to save her, she became embarrassed and awkwardly began to make excuses, explaining that her research had simply dragged on a bit. Embarrassed, the young man offered the sorceress food, which he carefully wrapped in a towel. The sorceress accepted the treat with gratitude. The sorceress explained that their group had planned to check every trap in this dungeon, but the situation had gotten complicated, and they had already lost 82 adventurers. The sorceress shared her suspicions that the loss of so many high-level adventurers seemed extremely strange, despite the dungeon's recommended level being 50, 27 level 60 adventurers, 46 level 50 adventurers, and even 9 adventurers above level 70 had already died. The sorceress also mentioned a rumor about a trap that would teleport you directly to the boss room, and everyone who entered would die. Her goal was to find this room and destroy the boss. Suddenly, the boy grabbed the sorceress by the hand and resolutely offered to fight the boss together, reminding her of his oath to protect the people dear to him. Without weakening his determination, the boy added that he would definitely help her in the battle with the boss, because it was precisely for the sake of saving her that he had come all this long way. To the boy's surprise, the sorceress sharply whispered to him not to interfere in her affairs. She added that he was no match for her, especially in his shabby clothes, and she did not understand how he had managed to defeat all the monsters on his way to her. Their conversation was interrupted by a voice coming from the depths of the dungeon. A group of the sorceress's companions came out of the darkness, reporting the discovery of another trap and simultaneously expressing general dissatisfaction with the difficulty of their work. The sorceress suddenly hugged the boy, pressing him as close to her as possible, and quietly asked him to stand still. The sorceress told the boy that she would protect him and could not leave him alone with such a low level. Suddenly, the boy noticed golems appearing behind the sorceress's companions and shouted, warning of danger, but in response he heard only a quiet request not to fuss from the sorceress herself. And then the sorceress used the, quote, blade attack, Nip Centerton, rock crushing, and Gilbert Stein shield attack. The boy was amazed to see how each of them destroyed the monster with just one blow. Admiring the strength of the sorceress and her team, the boy continued to run forward, keeping up with them. While the sorceress's companions discussed tactics for passing the dungeon and approaching the boss, the sorceress herself watched with surprise at the undying enthusiasm of the first-level boy. Taking the boy's shield, the sorceress reminded him of her instructions to stand still and not interfere. Then she and her companions moved forward, meeting another golem. Surprised by the size of the new monster, which was much larger than the previous ones, the sorceress companions assumed that it could be the cause of the death of many adventurers. While the sorceress was studying the monster's abilities with her vision, one of her companions decisively attacked, using, quote, rock crushing, but the blow did not cause any harm to the monster. The blonde wizard shouted at the young sorceress, warning her that physical attacks were useless against this monster. When she was about to attack it with magic and drown it, the monster began to spit stones at her, but her other friend managed to protect her with his shield, taking a defensive stand pose. The rain of stones that fell on them threw the sorceress's staff far away. Each time, obeying her order to stay put, the boy watched as the sorceress tried to run out from behind her staff, only to be immediately hit by a hail of stones. The young man wondered with surprise if she would really risk going out into such a barrage for the sake of her staff. Having advised the sorceress to wait, the boy broke out of hiding and, deftly dodging the stone rain, grabbed her staff. And so, when the boy returned the staff to the sorceress, she looked at him in surprise, trying to understand what level of dexterity he possessed, if even her experienced gaze could not follow his movements. Using her staff, the sorceress attacked the monster with the magic water blade, saltation, and won. Standing in front of the defeated monster, she thought about how she had hesitated to leave the shelter because of the stone rain, and realized that a thoughtless exit could have cost her her life. And while the boy, taking the sorceress by the hand, admired her amazing victory, she, looking at him, thought that he, risking his life, had come such a long way, and returned her staff not at all to show off. Quietly muttering an indistinct, "Thank you," She blushed slightly. But suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to glow with bizarre patterns. It turned out to be a huge trap. The sorceress immediately warned everyone that the monster they had defeated was not the main boss. She also called for vigilance and preparation for the inevitable move toward the real enemy. Suddenly, the entire team of adventurers found themselves in pitch darkness. The sorceress, finding this extremely suspicious, decided to analyze the situation with her vision and warned everyone that there was someone ahead. The enemy analysis showed the following characteristics: agility, 567, intelligence, 1956, resistance, 3,743. Their defense was 3,925, and their attack power was 4,101. Right in front of them, a level 100 automatic knight stood tall in the darkness. Even the members of Team Garbos did not have a level above 100. The entire team was extremely surprised, including the boy, because his former enemy Gilmero had a significantly lower level. While everyone was wondering where such a strong boss came from, whom no one could defeat, the sorceress understood that this oddity was the true reason for her presence here. Having concentrated her magical energy on the entire team, the sorceress began to cast a special spell that would increase all the indicators of her companions many times over. Having reached maximum concentration, the sorceress gradually increased the magical power of her enhancing spell. With a resolute cry directed at the enemy, the sorceress declared that he had unjustly taken the lives of many adventurers and endangered the very existence of their activities, and that he would definitely pay for it. For the sake of order in her city, she swore to destroy him, no matter the cost. Inspired by the sorceress's speech, her companions one by one declared their readiness to fight for their hometown, and vowed to protect her during the preparation of a powerful spell, no matter what it cost them. In response, the automatic knight was only amazed by their flawless fighting stance. The dark-haired defender with the shield attacked first, using the all-piercing sword attack, but was immediately pierced by the enemy's knife. His enraged friend charged back, but quickly realized that the automatic knight had no blind spots, making the fight extremely difficult. However, he stopped the sorceress, who tried to come to his aid, and ordered her to continue her spell, intending to buy her time at any cost. And then it dawned on the boy that he, too, could fight this enemy. After asking the sorceress if it was just a matter of buying time, the boy threw medicine to his wounded comrade with a shield and immediately rushed into battle, while the second friend, exhausted, lay on the ground, unable to dodge the crushing blows of the enemy from all sides. At first, the youth jumped over the automatic knight and delivered his weak blow with only 10 units of strength, only confirming the fears of the team shouting at him that he could not do anything. But then he realized that with the increase in his agility, his reflexes and dynamic visual acuity had greatly improved, thanks to which he could now track all the enemy's attacks. Fully aware of the full capabilities of his increased agility, which exceeded 1,000 units, the boy skillfully dodged all of the automatic knight's attacks. Having amazed all the members of the team with his agility, the boy made them understand that it was he, a first-level adventurer, who helped them escape certain death. Having thanked him, the sorceress asked the boy to leave. She explained that now that she knew how to get into the boss's room, she would be able to save the rest of the adventurers from a terrible fate. By honing her magic through continuous training, the sorceress reached the peak of her abilities with the help of the ruby staff. Her equipment, specially enchanted to enhance magic, gathered all of it together. The additionally cast strengthening spells increased her strength many times over, and, concentrating all this colossal energy in one point, she prepared to bring down a crushing fireball on the enemy. A huge fireball whistled and rushed straight towards the automatic knight. A powerful fireball completely destroyed the automatic knight, blowing it into tiny pieces. And while the whole team was looking in amazement at the huge, smoking trail left by the fireball, the boy was looking at the sorceress with admiration. Suddenly, someone pulled him towards themselves. Turning around, the boy saw the members of the sorceress's team. They were still scratching their heads excitedly, and, vying with each other to praise her strength, shared their impressions of what a difficult opponent the automatic knight had turned out to be. The sorceress herself joined in the praise, admitting that it was thanks to his help that they were able to win. The boy, embarrassed, tried to brush off the thanks. The boy froze for a moment, touched by the team's sincere words of gratitude. Now everyone was discussing how fortunate it was that no one else would get into the boss's secret room, and they couldn't stop marveling at how the young man had managed to dodge all the attacks. The young man responded to the praise in his mind, admitting that deep down he was afraid that even if he had increased his agility with the help of the Books of Truth, he would still be of no use in a fight with such a strong opponent. Remembering their first meeting, the sorceress thought with a smile that now Gilmero would definitely not be able to harm the boy, because he would be able to easily dodge all of his attacks. Meanwhile, in the beer stand, Gilmero, overcome with rage, was draining more than 1 mug of beer, not listening to anyone around him, and taking out his anger on those around him because some insignificant boy had humiliated him so. Suddenly, one of his friends called out to him. Gilmero's friend reported that he could not find the boy's home, which further enraged the thug. Grabbing his friend by the hair, Gilmero lifted him high into the air and threatened to kill him too if he did not find the boy's house. The frightened friend began to justify himself, explaining that because the boy was always alone, no one knew where he lived. Gilmero, leaning over his friend who was lying on the floor trying to catch his breath, angrily reminded him of his little sister and promised that as soon as he found the boy, he would grind him into dust, and he would regret not having died in a ditch when he was thrown out. Listening to this angry tirade, Gilmero's friend was perplexed as to why he was so obsessed with this boy. With a mad glint in his eyes, seemingly staring into nothingness, he growled that he wanted to see the despair in the boy's eyes as he killed him, and that was why he needed his little sister. Meanwhile, in her humble abode, tossing and turning in her sleep, the boy's little sister suddenly screamed as if she sensed trouble, and whispered for her brother to run away. When the tension in the team eased and the guys were chatting freely, the boy felt proud that he was able to save someone dear to him, and he was looking forward to telling his sister about it. But suddenly one of the team members caught his attention, noticing that there was something strange about everything that had happened. He noted that none of the team gained experience after defeating the boss. The boy, looking ahead, noticed that something huge was quickly approaching them. The boy, shouting the sorceress's name, pushed her aside from the blow, urging her to be careful. A powerful blow froze the sorceress's companions. She barely managed to shout out their names, intending to help, when the boy stopped her. While the sorceress was looking around in confusion, trying to understand what was happening, the young man shouted that a shadow had burst out of the armor of the defeated enemy, and was now attacking from all sides. This news greatly surprised the sorceress, because it turned out that their enemy had a second form. The sorceress explained that when a certain threshold of weakness is reached, bosses gain new abilities, significantly increasing the power of their attacks and the effectiveness of their skills. The sorceress emphasized that now the battle with the enemy they thought defeated will become much more difficult. She tried to attack the enemy, but his movements were too fast. Once again, the boy saved the sorceress from an enemy attack. She suggested that he use his staff to try to attack the enemy before he could move. However, the boy replied with disappointment that he would not be able to do so, since his strike power was only 10 units. The sorceress urged the boy to come up with a plan, reminding him that it was his actions that had led them to victory last time, and that the boy would not be able to use his dodge skill for too long. The young man agreed with her and began to say that his dodge skill required 5 mana, MP. The boy said that he had one way, but first he wanted to know if the sorceress was ready to trust him with her life. The young man understood that boss doors usually meant a passage through the wall to the room with the reward, but this was different. He was not sure if there would be a reward behind this room, and if he would be able to slip through with the sorceress. He honestly admitted to the sorceress that this was a risky undertaking, in which the probability of failure significantly exceeded the chance of success. Despite this, the young man again turned to the sorceress with the question of whether she could trust her life to someone whose level was only the first. The shadow continued to grow, becoming more and more powerful. Instantly dodging all the shadow's attacks, he picked up the sorceress in his arms. In his thoughts, the young man expressed gratitude to the sorceress for coming to his aid at the most difficult moment and saving him. At that very moment, the sorceress answered him that his level was absolutely unimportant to her. With a smile on her face, she added that she believed in him and trusted him with her life completely. Encouraged by her answer, the young man asked to increase his level of protection as much as possible. However, realizing the young man's plan, the sorceress objected in amazement, calling his idea madness because he was going to take the shadow's blow on himself. In response, the boy only insistently repeated that he had to do it. The sorceress stood resolutely before the young man and declared that she would take the blow herself, since she had a much better chance of surviving it. Taking one last look at their comrades, they both prepared for the impending attack. A crushing blow fell upon the young adventurers, and somewhere in the distance, a loud cracking sound was heard. Everything around was illuminated by the brightest ray of light, a powerful shockwave through the sorceress, and the young man a considerable distance away. Activating his evasion skill, the young man prepared for the inevitable collision. However, having passed through the wall, they suddenly found themselves in absolute darkness, rapidly falling somewhere down. The fall into pitch darkness continued, taking them deeper and deeper into the unknown. The young man and the sorceress found themselves in complete darkness. The boy, overcome with horror, began to apologize to the sorceress, realizing that they had left the confines of the dungeon and found themselves in another dimension, whose space extended to infinity. Holding the sorceress tightly, the young man tried to bring her to her senses. The long fall ended with a strong impact on some surface. Feeling the ground, the boy realized that although he could not feel the touch, they were definitely on some kind of surface. He began to gently shake the sorceress, trying to bring her to her senses, and at the same time took out a vial of healing potion from his inventory. After giving the sorceress the medicine to drink, the boy hugged her tightly, feeling great relief that she was alive. He whispered to the still unconscious sorceress that they must have fallen to the very bottom of the other side of the dungeon. Looking around, the boy saw nothing but pitch darkness. However, noticing a faint glimmer of light in the distance, he carefully placed the sorceress on his back and headed towards it. The young man ran straight towards the light, hurrying to find a way out of this strange place, because time was running out, and he needed to give the medicine to his little sister as soon as possible. Guillermo, who had already drained more than one glass of beer, was still seething with anger, because no one had been able to find the boy's house. Leaving the bar, he headed for the outdoor toilet, but its door was locked. Shouting threats and kicking the door furiously, Guillermo demanded that whoever was there immediately come out, reminding him of his position as one of the Big Three. However, upon hearing a familiar voice, he immediately became embarrassed and began to apologize, awkwardly justifying himself by saying that he did not recognize the interlocutor. Veldemar appeared behind the door. Mr. Veldemar, patting the confused brute on the shoulder, asked how the boy he had lent him for a while was doing. Carrying the sorceress on his back, the young man reached the source of light, which turned out to be a brightly glowing stone hovering in zero gravity. Struck by the unprecedented sight, and unable to examine the strange stone, the boy reached out to take it. However, right in front of the glowing stone, a huge warning appeared that receiving unrealized data could lead to serious errors. After hesitating for a while and being confused by the warning he had read, the boy, feeling hopeless in this cocoon of pitch darkness, nevertheless decided to ignore the warning and agreed. And at that very moment they found themselves right at the entrance to Trump's dungeon, and in the boy's hands was the same glowing stone. Assuming that the movement was due to the stone, the boy immediately began to examine himself for any changes, and was surprised that everything had gone so smoothly. Letting out a joyful cry from the realization of their salvation, the boy, still holding the sorceress in his arms, quickly ran to take the medicine to his little sister. Meanwhile, after listening to Guillermo's confused story, Mr. Veldemar asked him if he remembered what they had agreed upon when he handed him over the boy. He ordered him to be taken into the group and carefully disposed of. A boy enters a familiar stall, carefully carrying a sorceress on his back. Seeing him, the bored stall owner, not believing his eyes, rushes to embrace the young man. Guillermo's confused story about how they had driven the boy away and lost him, the noble wizard became furious and began to shower the brute with angry insults. The noble wizard reminded Guillermo that his only job was to deliver the boy to a high-level dungeon. In response, the brute began to justify himself, claiming that this was exactly what he had done. Guillermo explained that the boy had managed to survive each time thanks to his special evasion skill. To this, the noble wizard, as if remembering something, said that they needed to go somewhere. The noble wizard brought the unfortunate Guillermo into the forest, and, declaring that since he could not kill the boy, he was now useless, swung his sharp sword. At this point, the brute pleaded, promising to do everything properly. In response, the wizard only asked if he knew why the evasion skill was so useless. The noble wizard explained to Guillermo that the evasion skill was very difficult to use, as it had to be activated at the very moment of an enemy attack in order for it to work. He added that the slightest delay would cause the skill to fail, which he said was why experienced adventurers who possessed the skill chose to seal it. The wizard also noted that the success rate of this skill is only 10%, and few would dare to take such a high risk of death. However, he emphasized that when used skillfully, this skill is unrivaled. Still holding the sword in front of the warrior, the wizard declared that since the boy could use such a complex skill, the brute would not be able to defeat him. In response, the brute laughed loudly and, lowering the tip of the knife, assumed that both the wizard and the boy had decided to laugh at him. In a rage, he smashed the wizard's sword to pieces and declared that he would not tolerate ridicule any longer. In an indescribable rage, Guillermo shouted that he would kill anyone who dared to mock him, even if that mocker turned out to be a wizard. Guillermo, continuing to shout and call the boy a pathetic brat, insisted that he would never be able to defeat him, because his attack power was only 10, and he would easily grind him into dust. Watching Guillermo's uncontrollable laughter, the wizard thought deeply about whether he could handle the boy, and whether he should trust him. At the same time, the image of an old friend appeared in his memory, and he wondered with interest how fate would now turn out. The sorceress opened her eyes in her bright room, lying on her bed, and turned to her butler, who had just noticed her awakening, with a question about who saved her. The butler answered that the owner of a street stall had carried her to the guild on his back, but that a young adventurer had carried her to the stall. Dressed in an elegant new dress, the sorceress entered a street stall and addressed a young boy. Her appearance attracted the attention of the stall owner, who was surprised to inquire about the reason for her elegant appearance. Having thanked the shop owner for his help, the sorceress asked with slight embarrassment whether the young boy had come here. Having received a negative answer, she became slightly upset. The shop owner surprised the sorceress by suggesting that the boy was most likely currently fighting the golem in Trump's dungeon. Meanwhile, a huge crystal golem towered in front of the boy. In the room reserved for adventurers on the 62nd floor of the dungeon, the boy fought hard, striving to become as strong as possible. By timing the moment the golem began to accumulate energy, the boy successfully dodged the attack without even resorting to using his evasion skill. With the firm intention of defeating the crystal golem despite its clumsiness and multiple ranged attacks, the boy, realizing that the golem would continue to attack in one direction if he moved away from it, resolutely ran straight towards it. The boy noticed that when he tried to get closer, the golem changed its attack type, but still continued to attack. Gathering his courage, he rushed forward, straight towards the golem, which at that moment attacked with a stone wave. The golem's attack spread across the entire floor, literally pushing the adventurers against the walls. If the boy managed to slip under the golem's feet, he would be safe. In addition, if he grabbed the golem's leg during the attack, it would try to shake him off, giving him the opportunity to use his evasion skill. Having figured out the scheme of the dungeon passage, the boy deftly and without problem slipped through the wall and found himself in the room with the reward. Knowing that it was in this dungeon that he would be able to find what he wanted, he purposefully headed towards the chest. Remembering his previous battle with the automatic knight and the fallen comrades from the sorceress's team, the boy was full of determination to obtain this reward. The young man's main goal was to enhance his attacking abilities. In the chest, he found a book of knowledge that, when used, slightly increased the chance of a critical physical attack. Without thinking, the boy clicked yes in the glowing window that appeared. Minorly increased physical critical chance, the skill description read. It increased the probability of inflicting major damage on an enemy, regardless of whether the strike hits a weak spot or not, when physically attacking by 3%. However, in order to deal critical damage to an enemy, it was still necessary to hit their weak point. A weak point is an area with a relatively low defense value, determined by the value of the corresponding characteristics. Remembering the level 3 kobolds from Facilier's dungeon, the boy remembered that even if he hit their weak points, he did not cause them any damage. Thinking about how much he needed to increase his attack power given his current damage output of 10, the boy began to think about the number of upgrades he needed. With an excited heart full of hope, the boy believed that by improving his skills, even he would be able to defeat any monster. Determined to test the skill he had acquired, slightly increased physical crit rate, the boy prepared for battle. While thinking about how exactly his physical stats could increase, the boy suddenly came up with the idea that the book, Slight Increase in Physical Crit Chance, could be used repeatedly, like the book Truths. And just a moment later, several books entitled Slight Increase in Physical Crit Chance were lying in the boy's hands. With extreme excitement, the young man pressed the glowing Increase Strength window several times, activating each book he received. But suddenly, when activating another book, a window appeared in front of the boy. Extreme Increase in Critical Chance Used. The description said that this skill increases the probability of inflicting great damage on the enemy, regardless of whether the blow hit a vulnerable spot or not, during a physical attack by as much as 99%. The boy was extremely surprised, because he believed that, quote, significant increase was the limit, so he took 3 books with such a skill. However, the boy's curiosity was stronger. He was eager to find out what might follow the quote, extraordinary increase, and he ran for a new book. And so, having already collected 10 books with a reward, the boy was surprised to be about to increase his strength indicators as much as possible. But a previously unfamiliar warning window appeared in front of him. The notice stated that, quote, extremely increased physical critical rate was the highest level of this skill, and it would take some time to further develop it. The young adventurer was getting ready for another trip to the dungeon, and before setting off, he carefully checked whether he had all the necessary equipment with him. At the same time, his thoughts were occupied by the notification he had seen earlier. Sitting on the edge of his sister's bed, the boy excitedly told her how he had greedily grabbed books to increase his strength, and how he had not expected such a turn of events at all. And yet, despite everything, he still burned with a desire to become stronger. And, filled with hope, he shared his cherished wish to save up as much money as possible and buy a medicine that would heal his little sister, or to find this medicine as a reward in one of the dungeons in order to see her happy smile again. And then the boy's mind flashed back to the memories of how sullen and dirty he used to return to his sister when she was not yet bedridden. She always greeted him with a smile, and he, showing no interest, silently walked to his bed. After his father's death, the master handed the boy over to Guillermo's team. There, he was beaten, humiliated, and used as bait for monsters every day. But he endured all this just to earn money for medicine for his sister. The little sister gently shook her tired brother, trying to wake him up and get him out of bed, but he sleepily waved her off, muttering that he wanted to sleep some more. And so, after threatening her brother that she would go alone, she was able to drag him out of bed. They had an unspoken rule that she should never leave the house without an escort. They were standing on the shore of a beautiful, endless sea. The little sister really enjoyed reading books while sitting by the water. Joyfully, she ran to swim, cheerfully calling her brother to join her. They splashed happily, playfully splashing water at each other, and frolicked merrily in the sea waves. And, noticing the smile on her brother's face, the little sister suddenly burst into tears and admitted that she hadn't seen him so happy for a long time. Bursting into tears, she threw herself into her brother's arms and begged him to give up the dangerous trade of an adventurer, to stop earning money for medicine. She said that she would feel much better if she just saw his smile every day. Hugging his sister tightly, he immediately returned to the fun and, full of energy, ran up the high cliff. From the height of the cliff, he made a firm promise to himself that his little sister would never have to worry about him again. He would do everything possible to ensure that her face was always lit up with a happy smile. Gently stroking his sister on the top of her head, he once again, this time to himself, swore that he would do everything to ensure that her smile never left her face. And so, having gathered himself, he went into the dungeon again. Before closing the door, he said a warm goodbye to his sister. The door burst out of its frame with a bang, and Guillermo burst into the room, grinning evilly and shouting that he wanted to play with the boy's sister. Standing in a circle of his friends, one of them grinned and said that thanks to his tracking skills, he was able to track down the boy's house while he was away. However, to the surprise of the whole company, the house was completely empty. In a rage, he hit one of his henchmen hard, barking that the most valuable thing in this house was his little sister, once again leaving his friends completely bewildered. Entering the room where the boy's little sister was, he greeted her sarcastically, hinting with a nasty grin that he had been waiting for this meeting for a long time. Kicking the bed hard, Guillermo grabbed his sister by the hair and lifted her off the floor. He shook her roughly and asked her with a nasty grin if she wanted to have some fun with him, not noticing that the girl was still unconscious. Hitting the girl with all his might, Guillermo yelled at her to wake up and then roughly threw her onto the cold floor, shocking the rest of the team at his brutality. Trying to get at least some kind of reaction, he began to mercilessly kick the motionless body of his little sister, who was still lying unconscious on the floor. One of the girls on Guillermo's team suggested that the girl was unconscious, pointing to her medicine on the nightstand. In response, she only heard him sigh in boredom, showing complete indifference to the condition of the boy's sister. Still looking at the motionless body of the girl, Guillermo roughly grabbed her by the hair and muttered with contempt how useless she was, since she couldn't even cry or scream, but only barely breathed. Smiling maliciously, he wondered what he could do with her then. Convinced of the futility of his actions, he returned the girl to the bed and ordered her to sleep. Then he ordered his team to leave the room. Within moments, the young boy's house was engulfed in bright flames. He watched the burning house, his sinister laughter growing louder. The shocked team members watched the fire in silence. Finally, one of them couldn't take it anymore, and, approaching it, said that the girl could burn alive in the fire. In response to her words, Guillermo only gave her his most evil smile and said that it was extremely funny to watch everything that was dear to this boy burn. At this moment, the sound of a medicine bottle and a bag of money falling to the ground attracted the team's attention. A young boy stood before them, shocked by what he had seen. In response to his horror, Guillermo only cynically stated that he was a little late. He sarcastically addressed him as a little brother, and continued to watch while the boy stood in a daze in front of the burning house. The roof of the burning house, engulfed in flames, collapsed down, and the whole building began to settle in flames. Guillermo stood proudly next to the burning house. The boy, without taking his eyes off the burning ruins, asked him about his little sister, trying to find out if she was inside. To this question, he replied mockingly that, without a doubt, she was already well rouged. Guillermo stopped his friend and said that it was too early to kill the boy. He watched with obvious pleasure as he fell to his knees in front of the burning house and began desperately screaming his sister's name. The boy stood motionless on the cold ground, kneeling down. Throwing his head back, he let out a piercing scream. This heartbreaking cry brought a satisfied smile to Guillermo's face. When the boy cried out, he mockingly told him to continue crying, angrily shouting that his sister had died because of his weakness. All the memories and dear images associated with his little sister instantly surfaced in the boy's mind. Her bright image clearly appeared before his eyes. Enjoying the boy's suffering and laughing maliciously, he asked if he had anything to say in the end. He demanded that the boy, rising from his knees, show him his face, distorted with horror. But instead of the expected horror, he was met only by the angry and stern gaze of a boy, tears silently flowing down his cheeks. He froze in bewilderment. But then he was overcome with rage. But then he exploded with a scream, asking if the boy understood in front of whom he dared to show such an expression. Meanwhile, looking at the starry sky and slowly sipping his wine, the young master thought that there was probably a fight going on right now. He wondered if the boy had gotten scared and run away using his evasion skill. Suddenly, a glowing notification panel appeared right in front of the boy, illuminating everything around with a bright light. A small figure emerged from the glowing panel and solemnly announced that a new update was available and would be activated immediately. A new skill has been activated. Extremely increased critical attack chance. At that very moment, a change was clearly felt in the air. The boy gripped the knife tightly in his hand and raised it. He pointed the tip of the knife forward. Everyone around noticed the strange, sinister aura that surrounded the knife in the boy's hands. The members of Guillermo's team tried to warn their leader, pointing out this unusual power, but he was completely implacable. He continued to mock, claiming that the boy was too weak to even scratch him, and that even his vaunted evasion skill would be completely useless against him. He promised the boy that he would finish him off for the bloodthirsty look with which he dared to look at him. What irritated him most was that the boy never fell on his knees before him. He stood in a fighting stance, holding the weapon in his right hand and looking forward with a confident smile. He took the axe of despair in his hands, which, if the enemy's level is lower, increases the attack by 2 to 3 times. Threatening his team members to stand by and not interfere, promising to deal with anyone who disobeyed, he prepared to deal the boy a fatal blow. After confidently asking first if the boy was going to attack, Guillermo immediately sarcastically corrected himself, stating that there was no point in any attack on his part anyway. He decided to start with his fastest attack and, confidently jumping, challenged the boy, offering to use his dodging skill if he dared. But something went wrong. His attention was drawn to the disappearance of the mysterious aura around the boy. He mockingly assumed that the boy had finally decided to give in, realizing his powerlessness before him. He brandished his axe and told the boy that, since he had surrendered, he would finish him off. He added with contempt that he had thought the boy had some courage at first, but that he was likely to meet the same miserable end as himself. However, the blow of the axe passed through nothingness, although the boy did not move. One of his friends tried to warn him about something, but he just angrily ordered her to shut up and not interfere. A meter away from the stunned Gilmero lay his severed hand, still tightly clutching the bloody axe. Staring at his bloody hand, which was streaming blood, he suddenly let out a loud scream, trying to comprehend what was happening. With a cry of horror, he fell to his knees, convulsively clutching the bloody stump of his arm. He panicked, trying to figure out when the boy had managed to strike and cut off his hand, and whether it really was the same weak boy he had just humiliated. Spewing curses and insults, he shouted at the boy, demanding to know how he dared to do this. Clutching the bloody fatal blade in his hands, the boy promised to cut out all the pain that had been caused to his little sister. The entire team was shocked by what they saw. Their leader's severed arm seemed impossible, as his defense level was far superior to most of the adventurers in the city. Completely confused and not understanding what was happening, he could only vaguely guess what this mysterious skill was, with which the boy threatened to cut out the pain his sister had experienced. One of the teammates, activating her enemy search skill, excitedly shouted to the others that the boy physically could not have delivered such a stealthy and devastating blow alone, and that he probably had an accomplice. But she was immediately interrupted by another team member, who had the highest agility, stating that he had closely followed the movements of their leader at the moment of the attack and had seen the boy's movements. He explained to the astonished crew that he had seen the boy rush forward, cut off their leader's arm, and then retreat, leaving them all in complete bewilderment. He added haltingly that the boy's agility was clearly far superior to even his own, and while this team member tried to convey to the others that none of them could defeat the boy, Gilmero, hearing this, became even more inflamed with fighting spirit. Suddenly, the quick help skill activated under his feet. It was one of his partners, who shouted that she would not be able to restore her arm, and the effect would not last long, but at least she would be able to stop the bleeding. Blinded by rage, he struck his partner. He growled that he had ordered them to stay away. Continuing to furiously kick the girl lying on the ground, he shouted how dare she think that he was losing, and who did she take him for? While the rest of the team rushed to help the injured girl, trying to give her a healing potion, he turned back to the boy, ready to continue the fight. Once again declaring that he would never lose to this boy, he hissed with hatred that now he would finally understand what a real difference in strength was. He activated his powerful skill, Dreadnought, which instantly increased his defense level to an impressive 4503. With a devilish grin, he thought that this defense was more than enough to withstand any attack from the boy, and even if he tried to attack him again with lightning speed, he would have time to meet him with his axe and cut him in half. But before he could finish his self-confident speech, the boy, like a shadow, darted forward and the next moment cut off his second hand. When the second severed hand with the axe flew off to the side, he let out a heart-rending cry, not understanding how this could have happened, because he had just significantly strengthened his defense. Meanwhile, the boy calmly drank the contents of a small jar of medicine that he was carrying for his little sister, and casually threw the empty bottle aside. The boy said quietly but firmly that his skill was capable of completely ignoring the enemy's defense. Gripping the bloody knife tighter, he added with tears frozen in his eyes that he would never forgive him for what he did to his little sister. In desperation, he croaked to his team to come help him and kill the boy, but none of them dared to join the fight. The team members, fully aware that attacking an opponent who could easily turn any armor into paper and whose movements were virtually invisible was tantamount to suicide, did not dare move from their spot, despite the desperate cries of their boss. He began to run, calling his former comrades useless creatures and swearing foully at them. Behind him came the calm voice of a boy, asking where he was going and whether he should not accept the full weight of his sins. The boy, without wasting a second, quickly delivered several more lightning-fast blows to the back of the fleeing enemy. The piercing blow of the knife as it sank into his skin made him let out a heart-rending cry. A moment after the fatal attack of the fatal blade, the enemy's body shuddered, and a fountain of blood sprayed in all directions. The boy mercilessly unleashed another series of lightning-fast blows on the defeated enemy. From the piercing pain, he let out such a deafening scream that it echoed throughout the surrounding area. Exhausted, wounded, and bleeding, he collapsed to the ground. A heavy, tense atmosphere hung around the boy, filled with the aftermath of the brutal fight that had just taken place. With a heavy and desperate sigh, looking at the lifeless, bloody body of their boss, the team members spoke in one voice, realizing the final defeat of their leader. One of the influential Garboza Big Three fell at the hands of a despised, first-level prisoner. And while one of the partners feverishly persuaded the girl whom the boss had hit to run, she obediently replied that she was ready to accept any punishment if that was the boy's will. She continued that in their team, the boss always did whatever he wanted, and they just silently watched and even encouraged it. But what he did this time goes beyond all imaginable limits. But then the sound of a knife falling to the ground caught their attention. The boy knelt down in front of his opponent's motionless body and continued to deliver furious blows with his fists. Already delivering weak blows with his fists, only 10 units of damage without using any skills, the boy seemed to be deafened by his own memories of his words. Through his tears, the boy muttered that he endured all the humiliation and bullying only because he had his little sister. Crying, the boy continued that no matter how many times he was beaten and kicked, he could endure any pain and humiliation, just to see the bright smile of his beloved little sister again. Remembering his touching promise to his little sister that he would do everything possible to always have a smile on her face, the boy burst into a desperate cry, full of unbearable pain. How would he live without her now? Realizing their own cowardice and inaction, the members of Guillermo's team one by one decided to stay and suffer the punishment they deserved, because it was their silent consent and connivance that allowed their boss to commit evil. At the same time, a bitter feeling of pity stirred in their hearts for their dying comrade, whom they could not leave to die all alone. But suddenly, the seemingly defeated boss made a desperate lunge and bit the boy's shoulder with his teeth, biting it until it bled. Shocked by the sudden attack, the teammates couldn't understand how their boss was still able to fight, immediately correcting themselves that this was no longer a fight, but pure animal instinct. While the bitten boy stood motionless, unable to use his dodge skill in this position, a new thought came to his mind. Grinning arrogantly through clenched teeth, he croaked that he was not going to die alone and would definitely take the boy with him, after which he activated his deadly self-destruct skill. But suddenly a sharp blade with a dull thud pierced the boss's head, shocking all the members of his team who were watching this scene, and the boy himself. Right before the astonished boy's eyes, someone's hand began to form from strange, writhing tentacles, leaving him completely confused. In front of the stunned boy, against the backdrop of a house engulfed in flames, stood his beloved little sister. Someone shouted to the long-haired girl, "Sister!" The man in armor saw the ghost, as did the girl. The ghost was a little girl. Henri's sister was alive, and this couldn't be because the boss burned all the scrap to the ground. The girl with an angry expression asked, "Who are you?" She was not Elareth. The little girl showed a creepy smile with sharp fangs. She lifted her white t-shirt like a dress and wished good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and also to the whole world around her. Her name was Someone Tian. She had no name, and therefore she was Someone Chan. The girl screamed for her to stop and asked who she was. And what was she doing in this body? Suddenly, someone ran to her and shouted with joy that she was grateful that the girl did not understand. Someone Chan pulled her hand to the area of her heart. She opened her skin to the sides, and instead of organs, she had a crystal, with 4 more small crystals around it. She was the same unrealized data that he raised. Since the physical shell is what was next to it gave up its spirit in the fire, the girl borrowed her appearance. Long ago, in a certain kingdom, in a certain state, there were created data that were only given content. These data saw dreams. What would they do if they had access to the outside? They did not know which city they would attack first and how to exterminate the human species. However, these data were not given any appearance or land, and they were thrown out. That place was dark, dark. The other side of the dungeon was called But even these data continued to emit light, refused to surrender. And they dreamed of the day of reckoning, and that one day they will sweep across the big world like a storm. So here it is, those same unrealized data. The girl couldn't wrap her head around all this, and he picked up that data when he was wandering around the other side of the dungeon with Orya-san. The girl started screaming that this wasn't right. She was his sister. She screamed for him to give his sister his body, and could he imagine how hard it was? But he answered with a creepy smile with fangs, no way. Now the body belonged to him, but the girl kept asking him what not to do. And what was he going to do with her sister's body? Someone Chan flew up with big wings and said that he was a raid boss, he was going to bring misfortune to the human race. This is the meaning of his existence. The raid boss flew up and said with the same smile that it was time to begin the genocide of humanity. The girl couldn't believe that he had become a monster and that he was a raid boss. It was a suddenly appearing monster that was simply unthinkable to be destroyed by one group. It was a disaster on a global scale that would require the joint efforts of many groups to eliminate. Suddenly the raid giggled and attacked with a fireball. Someone Chan said that it was useless and she was very strong. And in order to make a suitable opponent for them, Guillermo's corpse would be enough. She presented the girl with a corpse, with a bullet in the head, and the neck wrapped with the same tentacles as if with tentacles. She decided to have fun creating monsters, and it was very simple. Anyone who has a unique skill with creating a monster can handle it, and said to repeat after her. Someone Chan said that first you need to prepare a fresh corpse of an adventurer, and the higher the level of the adventurer, the stronger the monster will be. She said that you just need to imagine that they are molding plasticine, and began to knead it. Blood splashed in all directions, and even the eye of the adventurer flew off. And so she created a beautiful, pumped-up monster. Suddenly, the girl ran up and asked this monster, "Is it him?" His hands were in place, and the wound on his forehead had healed. But someone asked what she was doing, and this little one, her new monster. His mouth opened wide, where there was a huge tongue and huge fangs. Someone Chan ordered him to eat her. Suddenly, the monster ate half the body with one bite, and someone Chan couldn't believe that it was in one bite. Suddenly, the guy with the mohawk screamed, "How dare he!" And after all, it was his sister. But someone Chan gave the monster commands to eat everyone. Someone Chan was somehow sorry to call him just Monster Rick, and while the monster was eating everyone, she thought that it was necessary to approach this issue with all responsibility and give him a name, with motherly love. After all, she is his mother. Guillermo's entire group was destroyed in an instant, and they all had high levels. The monster's body changed, and it ate the high-level adventurers and therefore grew a little. Someone decided to call it a shapeless giant. He became very huge and overly muscular. His back seemed to have spikes like his arms, and his body showed the frightened faces of those he had eaten. Someone decided to attack the Garibos. Suddenly, some boy stood in front of this monster and thought in fear, what if this monster attacks the city? Until now, this boy could fight bosses of any size only by using evasion, but now he used all the mister and all the potions in the battle with Guillermo. He had never defeated a boss before, but he couldn't just let him get away. It seemed the monster was feeling bad, but it seemed... No, someone Chan was feeling bad. Someone Chan's suffering somehow affected him, and she said with horror, "Are you still trying to resist?" But the boy didn't understand. Resist? And he didn't understand what was happening to her? Nekchen screamed in horror not to stick her head out, and that this body was Nekchen. The boy noticed that she stopped moving in the air. Suddenly, someone said with tears in her eyes, "Run, brother." She kept shouting that she would stop the shapeless giant and that he would run away to take them. But the boy did not understand how he could run away. Someone Chan shouted that he was coming out from under control and he won't be able to hold it for long. Suddenly the boy ran shouting, "Elaret!" He was trying to pick up the fragments of the house. And suddenly she lifts the entire structure with one hand and asks, "What are you?" What he does, and her name is Someone, and that he can also add Chan at the end. She told him that he took over control when she got hit on the head, and the boy realized that it was really Elaret. One outside and the other inside for Someone Chan. It was a very noisy family, and said to listen to him carefully. She said that the devil knows how long she waited for the body. At the bottom of that side, her name is not Elaret. She was finally able to get it and get out. She ordered the shapeless giant to cheek before attacking the Garibos. She ordered him to slap this boy, calling him an idiot because he was getting on my nerves already. But suddenly, someone attacked the giantess. But for some reason, she stood still, which worried the boy. At the last moment, the shapeless giant said, "Hey, what the hell? He will follow her instructions." He also said that he will do what he wants, and he will kill whoever he wants. And he ordered to get lost and not to interfere with him. Someone Chan asked not to leave her alone because she had just managed to get out. And she thought that she was again of no use to anyone and would not be treated like trash for eternity. She asked herself why she deserved this and how this world had gotten to her. She was a raid boss and she was here to bring misfortune to humanity. She sent everything to hell. She decided to destroy this world. Give reasons. Suddenly, the boy came up to her and asked if she was okay? And who, one wonders, should she take her anger out on now? Someone Chan, he said, that the monsters told her that he hates her, and it turns out he wants to kill her and be free. It was clear to her that everyone hates her because she is a raid boss. The boy said that he would protect her, and if he wanted to hurt someone, he would protect her. Someone. She said that he is no better than others, and she screamed that he wanted to protect her and the sister inside her. Someone Chan angrily screamed for him to go, and what a brazen liar he was. She couldn't stand people like him the most, and the boy said that in truth. Was no good as a brother, and he couldn't protect his sister. He said she was right, and he wanted to protect his sister inside her, but honestly, he really hated her for taking his sister's body. Having lost his sister, he lost the meaning of life, and thanks to this and thanks to someone Chan, he was able to see his little sister again. He hugged someone Chan tightly, pressing her to himself. These feelings were real. He thanked someone, but someone Tyan? She told him not to think that now she would save him? Well, the boy didn't mind. Someone started attacking them, said that this time she would protect him. She called him a stupid little man, and did he really think that he could defeat the monster? Inside, someone Chan again screamed sister, and she was so worried about her brother. Then someone decided to chat with her a little. The boy completely ran out of MP because it all went into the battle with Guillermo, as did all the potions. He needed to somehow replenish it, and when Guillermo's group was killed, items fell out of them. He decided to try to raise the MP potion first. The monster's right hand had just grown to enormous proportions, and he used it to deliver his main attack. If the boy was careful, then with his current agility, he wouldn't have to worry about the monster's attacks. The boy had to figure out how to attack him. He decided to use potions and started drinking it. His MP was restored. These Zenovs would have been enough for him more than once. His only option was to attack with the Fatal Blade. Fatal Blade was a skill that ignored the enemy's defense, and to activate the ability you need to hit the enemy once, the attack ignored the target's defense. MP consumption changed depending on the enemy's defense, and when the boy fought Guillermo, MP consumption was 45. His maximum MP reserve was 90, and during the battle, he used a MP potion 4 times to fully restore his reserve. If he does not defeat him before the potion runs out, then he is finished. The boy thought that even if he broke through the monster's defense with his fatal blade with such a short dagger, he would hardly be able to inflict significant damage on him. It was madness to defeat the giant with a dagger and even with a limited MP, but he still had no other options he needed to destroy the monster from the inside. At some point, a crazy thought came into the boy's head. He thought that if his defense was so huge that the MP consumption exceeded his maximum reserve, then right during the attack, the boy's MP would completely run out, and once inside, he would no longer be able to get out. But he decided not to think, but just hit. He used a lot of the Fatal Blade, and blood spurted everywhere. He pierced the monster in the head area. For each use, the boy lost 30 megapixels, and this meant that the monster's defense was around 3,000. The boy was interested in whether the defense of weak points would change if he hit the Fatal Blade through the insides, through the eyes. He decided that these places would need to be analyzed. The boy had already used all the MP potions, and now everything was about to be decided. If he couldn't defeat the monster now, he wouldn't have another chance. Suddenly, the monster's hand turned into something like a tentacle that grabbed the boy by the leg. Was it really that easy to grab his leg by stretching his hand out from under the ground? The monster lifted the boy up by his leg. The boy should have guessed. It was obvious that the monster would not be defeated so easily. The monster threw the boy straight into the tree. The boy tried to use dodge, but it didn't work. He fell and groaned in pain. The bones in his arms were shattered into pieces, and he couldn't feel his left foot either. He needed to drink the potion as quickly as possible. But suddenly, he didn't find his bag. Suddenly, white feathers calmly flew towards the boy. The monster healed early. The boy tried to get up, hoping that he still had his right leg, and he still had 25 MP. For some time he could use dodge, and he tried not to give up. Suddenly, a certain Chan cut the monster in two, and the boy couldn't believe it. It was his little sister. She flew up to him on big wings and hugged him. She told him that she had watched everything from the inside and she was very worried about him. Brother apologized for the fact that she had to watch all this. Sister burst into tears and called her brother a fool. Brother told her to stop fighting alone. Suddenly, in his arms, his hand healed, his wounds disappeared, and his strength was completely restored. And he felt it. Sisters can't have such an ability because she's not even an adventurer. As it turned out, someone's body was capable of even this. Some Chan was inside her sister, and they chatted. She agreed to lend her sister her body for a while. And it's true. When she's outside, the voice from inside is really loud. Someone Chan was unhappy about what she and her brother were talking about, and sister said that it would be their secret. Only she couldn't occupy the body for long, and therefore, she asked her brother to tell her about himself as soon as possible. She didn't want to miss a second while they had the chance. Suddenly, the monster's body began to move. He has fully recovered. Was it because someone Chan cut him in two? Brother told her to step back, but sister said she would fight too. She said that when she started looking after the house, after that it became difficult for her to walk, and she would no longer allow him to fight alone. She suffered every day, watching how he had to risk himself in the dungeons because of her. She promised that everything will be fine, and now she is in the body of someone Chan. Now there were two monsters. They decided to deal with two monsters together. Her brother just told her not to do anything stupid. But while he was nearby, sister was ready for anything. But the question was, how could they defeat the monster? Its attacks were still primitive, and the brother would have been able to dodge them without any problems. Of course, the little sister couldn't be as beautiful as her brother Dodge, but since this body is someone Chan in strength, she definitely will not give in. However, in defeating it was the main problem, and it was the monster's ability to regenerate. Suddenly, the base of the monsters became bigger. It turns out that they couldn't be cut in two, and even if he was attacked, he would immediately recover. Tian held the huge monster with her small hands, but suddenly, the monster's tentacles grabbed her and lifted her up. Brother used the fatal blade and cut the tentacles. Because of this, the monster multiplied again, and it was necessary to regroup. He used dodges and flew through the monsters and their tentacles with his little sister in his arms. They couldn't defeat the monsters, and they needed to find a way to damage the monsters. Suddenly, the sister told him to leave it to her, and she wanted to check something. If they can't be cut down. When? What was about this? Sister hit with all her might. It turned out to be something similar to an explosion. Why was the brother surprised? He realized that she was right, and if they couldn't be cut, then maybe the blow would work. He wouldn't be able to use such a method of battle. Besides, the monsters were flying straight into the blazing house, and maybe the fire would also cause them some damage. Suddenly, from all this fire comes out a monster again. They couldn't understand how to defeat the one who couldn't even be harmed, and even the tentacles that Ellerith had grabbed began to turn into a monster. Even the tip of the severed arm was restored, but the monster was very small, and the brother was able to cut it in half with the fatal blade. Little monster disappeared, and the boy said, "Status!" MP consumption was excellent. It seems he figured out how to defeat the monsters. They didn't have time, and the boy said to listen carefully. He decided to distract the monsters. And sister at this time had to divide as much as she could. He couldn't do it with his knife, and he counted on his sister. But if she does this, then there will only be more of them. But the boy said not to worry and just trust him. He believed in her so much that he was even ready to become bait, and he believed that she would succeed. She herself wanted to fight with him, and it was her own decision. The more she chopped them up, the more there were, but they became smaller. Only the smaller they became, the faster they regenerated. Individually, they were, of course, weak, but there were too many of them. Her knife and hand were wrapped. There were a lot of them, and they wrapped all her limbs, stretching her to the sides. Suddenly, the fatal blade. All the little monsters flew in all directions, and it was a series of lightning strikes. Brother said that they defeated one, and it was all thanks to her. Sister, I knew he would come. It seems that if you cut a monster, it can only recover to the size of the cut-off part. And besides, It seemed that this reduction had its own limit. It was also good that the smaller they were, the less MP was consumed by the fatal blade. When the brother cut off the tentacles that grabbed his sister, he spent 7 megapixels. And when he destroyed that baby, he spent only 1 megapixel. The hugs of the sister, or rather the hugs of the angel, completely restored strength and MP. Now that they understood how to deal with them, they decided to deal with them faster and spend the rest of the time together. And the brother realized that if they are together, they are invincible. The sister agreed, and they needed to deal with the monsters before he will create to someone problems. They couldn't let him get to the Garibos. Together they were invincible, and now they have reached the last monster that could fit in the brother's hand. And sister suggested him together. The brother thought that he would never see her again, and thought that he would remain in the depths of despair. But he said that little sister writes, and they decided to put an end to this nightmare together. They cut the little monster in half. Now it was all over, and it had been a very long day for them. Suddenly something lit up. The status bar popped up by itself. Brother's level was raised to the 2nd. He leveled up for the first time, and until now he hadn't received experience. Because he couldn't deal damage to monsters, the opt was determined by the amount of damage dealt during the battle, not to mention the amount of experience that you can get if you finish off a monster. If you deal a lot of damage, then the amount of experience you get will increase. Now the brother was no longer a level 1 prisoner, and finally he succeeded. Then its level increased to 3. They were very surprised, and brother realized that it was because he killed a high-level monster, and the greater the difference between the adventurer and the monster, the more experience he would get when killing it. He defeated a monster created by a raid boss with his first level, and he should have gotten 24,357 experience. His level has increased again, and again its level increased to 5. He couldn't believe his eyes, and his level kept rising and was already 11. Remove-ka, even a complex appeared because of the fact that his attack never rose above 10. It was because of this that I felt like I was getting stronger. His sister supported him, saying that he did something amazing and saved not only her, but also the Garibos. His level had already increased to 14, and he did not understand how he deserved such a wonderful sister. They hugged each other happily and rejoiced at the increase in level. He couldn't even believe that he had suddenly reached level 15, and he still couldn't come to his senses, just like his sister. But suddenly, the panel lit up again. He acquired the skill of ball control because a certain number of monsters were killed with the ball. Brother fell to his knees. The skills of control were something like bow control, control pike, axe and hammer skills. These are skills of using a certain weapon. And even if you own a weapon without skills of using it, no one could benefit from this weapon. It was because of his lack of weapon skills that his attack was 10, and he only used his herb-picking knife for show, but from today on, little brother could finally wield a real weapon. Today was the day of farewell to the knife, and his weapon skills allowed him to compensate for his low attack. But my sister didn't understand what he was talking about at all. He told his sister that from now on, his brother will become even stronger. The initial skills he learned when he became an adventurer were swordsmanship, sword strike, and despair. Also, pike mastery, dash, 3-step strike, bow mastery, search, and random shooting. First, you were starved of weapon mastery skills, and a couple of other related ones, and in order to become an adventurer, you had to go to church and get the status. Instead of his father, he also had to go to church to somehow feed his sister. The only skill that my brother got was evasion. But now everything was different, and now he had gained the skill of wielding weapons. The little sister was very happy, and all this because she was nearby and the brother thanked her. Now that the brother was safe, it seemed that the little sister had lost all her strength. Suddenly she fell, but her brother managed to catch her. My sister barely started to apologize, and she said that it seemed to her that she could no longer occupy this body. Now it belonged to a certain Chan, and simply controlling it required incredible efforts. Brother shouted that he had a restorative potion in his bag, and that she should just say what she needed. But nothing could be done about it, and so she asked to let her stay in his arms a little longer. She also asked him not to make such a face. She asked him not to worry about her, and she would still be in this body. She just needed to get some sleep. She asked if he remembered how he used to tell her a story before bed as a child. She asked him to tell her one now, and she would fall asleep to it. He started telling the story of how he fought a secret boss to save Oria-san. Then she became an older sister to her, and he didn't understand what he was just talking about. After all, she was an aristocrat, and who was he? His sister couldn't open her eyes anymore, and it was time for her to sleep. He hoped that he too would someday meet his uncle from the gun shop and Oriya-san. He started to cry, and he thought that he would definitely introduce his little sister and older sister. He told her just to wait for him, and he promised her that he would find a way to get her back. She thanked her brother and asked him to be kind to Tatiana and the snow. And now the body was occupied by a certain Tien, and she asked why they so loved to go beyond the limits of what was permitted. Just a little more, and Elleret's soul would have burned to ashes. Someone Chan said that Elleret needs to sleep, and said that she eats weaklings like her brother for breakfast. Elleret hugged someone and told her to stop saying nasty things to her, that everything is fine. She also told someone that she can trust her little brother. Suddenly, someone Chan opened her eyes. He didn't know what to do next and probably needed to find new housing. He thought that first you need to go to the city and ask someone what she would say, but someone Chan asked if he forgot to add Chan at the end. Someone Chan agreed to go with him, but Brother said that the city was full of people, and Brother told her to promise that she would control herself. But suddenly, someone Chan got angry. She started screaming for him to promise not to break a single toy, when there was a whole bunch of them in front of him. Brother replied that actually he could, and someone Tien agreed that now she would also be patient. Her perception of the world was radically different from the human one. She was a raid boss, that is, a disaster for all of humanity. The whole point of her existence was to exterminate people, and my brother thought that Elleret said something to someone, and that's why she was acting so calmly now. He was wondering if they could get along. Suddenly, someone Chan got angry again and started screaming that she was fed up with these rags, and that these rags were very hard and uncomfortable. She asked if she could undress when they got to the city, but Brother answered that it was precisely there that it was not worth doing and understood how much she needed to be taught everything. Suddenly, someone rushed up as if she saw something there. She was very unpredictable. Waldemar-san appeared behind my brother. My brother had met him more than once when he was with his father, but he didn't understand what he was doing here. Suddenly, Waldemar-san laughed loudly and said that he had been wondering why the report was so late. He couldn't even think that his offspring would be able to kill Guillermo. The boy didn't understand what he was talking about and didn't understand what to do. I thought what he would do to him if he found out that Guillermo was dead, and if he was sent to prison now. But Waldemar-san was not going to do anything to him or accuse him of anything. And he was not going to tell anyone about it. For him, it was not such a rare event for their city, and he suggested, saying that the monster in the dungeon had done something. The boy asked how he knew that he had fought with him. The man replied that in their city, if a place in the Big Three became vacant, then who should you take it? And now that Guillermo is gone, he asked the boy who he thought should take his place. But the boy had no idea who, and suggested, Waldemar? But Waldemar replied that he must take the place. Henri. The boy asked why he and the man. He replied that the city was full of strong guys, and now maybe they would swallow it silently. He also promised to prepare something and began to leave. The information received turned out to be very useful, but the boy didn't understand what this information was and what he was going to prepare. Suddenly, someone Chan looked out from under the bushes and asked if he had left. Her instinct told her that she should have hidden, and it seemed he is terribly strong. Who would have thought that in a duel between Henri and Guillermo would lose? Waldemar thought, this city was getting interesting. The sweet girl was already sitting at the table and drinking tea, which smelled wonderful and was simply delightful. A man with a rock-like hairdo and a scar on his face said, "Who the hell knows?" And anyway, it was a weapons store, and a cute little girl had been dropping in here every day recently. The man could certainly understand the desire to drink some tea and relax, and it must have been difficult to sit and wait for a loved one, knowing that you were connected to him only by his store. He asked her if she had managed to thank him for saving her, but it seems she missed the moment and can't find another reason. The man asked her if she thought it was too late, but it seems the only thing left for the girl to do is to gather her courage and call him herself, and a man would support her. The man showed a piece of paper on which they wrote about something new dungeon, and the girl got one in the guild. It was written there that a new Dungeon X was discovered in the capital, which was assigned the highest level of difficulty. The monsters were unknown, as were the bosses. The initial reward was also unknown. There were rumors that this original reward was the Philosopher's Stone, and this dungeon was originally discovered thanks to literary sources, The Philosopher's Stone is a universal medicine capable of curing any disease, and even resurrect the dead, and this must have been a valuable thing. But there was nothing surprising in the fact that he was in this super complex X-dungeon, and with her abilities, the girl probably wouldn't even be allowed in there. Suddenly, Henri, carrying a huge sword in his hands, walked towards the girl. This is exactly why the girl came here every day, and today she would definitely thank him. She just needed to behave naturally. She began to say that this was not a coincidence. Henri, the man picked up Henri and hugged him tightly, saying how worried he was about him. And Henri didn't show up yesterday. The sweet girl realized that something was wrong with him. It was as if he had changed. She called Henri and asked what happened. But Henri replied that everything was as usual. Then she asked why he was crying then. After all, Henri had already promised himself that he would behave as usual, but he had no home or money, and he had no idea how to cure his little sister. And now Valdemar-san has come out of nowhere. Andre met him only once when he introduced him to Guillermo's group, and it all ended. Sadly, Henri thought that he wanted to drag him into some kind of adventure again. Henri would like to ask these two for help, but he didn't know how to explain to them that his sister became a raid boss and that he killed Guillermo, and how he goes through walls with dodge, and if he decided to ask them for advice, then he would have to tell them about something that he simply can't tell them. He apologized and said that everything was fine and just wanted to sell the sword. Suddenly the guy said, "Well, stop!" The girl started screaming at him to stop fooling around, and it was already clear that there was nothing wrong with him, and that was why she was worried about it. She asked if he wanted to tell her and that she wouldn't interrogate him. And did he really think that she would just pretend that nothing had happened after everything she had seen? She gave him instructions to go on a date with her today. Man said that it was very well said to Mrs. Ori, and stroking his head, Henri told him that if he keeps everything inside, nothing good will come of it, and that at such moments it is important to change the environment. Ori took Henri's hand and they went, but suddenly she came to her senses and thought that she hadn't thought about grabbing his hand. After all, she wanted to invite him somehow more elegantly, but then she sent everything to hell and asked herself in her head, what does this even matter? He was feeling bad right now, which meant that today she had to focus on how to cheer him up. She asked him how much longer he was going to make her wait, but Henri told her to wait outside. Ori and Soen-Shen seemed to be tearing him apart. Someone-Train was drawn to the street, and Ori was drawn to the house. Ori asked who she was anyway, but Someone-Tien, I asked what she just said, and what, is she tired of living? Someone-Chan screamed that this little man was her toy, and she was very angry when someone tried to take her toy. Henri, you understood that things were bad and he didn't know how to explain to him, O-R-I-I-san, who this Someone-Chan was? Ori asked that this was his girlfriend, and how could he even think that she had the right to treat him like that? Suddenly someone asked who she was to Henri, but she felt something different for him and loved him. Someone-Chan started screaming that she can prove their connection with Henri and said that they lived together. Suddenly Henri asked her why she was setting him up like that, apologized to Ori-san. He also said that this is his younger sister. Suddenly, Someone-Tien said that if she uttered even one more word, she would seriously kill her. She also said that Ori doesn't know anything, and then she should not interfere where she is not wanted. Henri apologized and said that they urgently need to find housing, and he was really sorry that he could not go with her. Aurea really wanted to help him, but she did not know anything about him. Someone teased, and Aurea thought that this was a war. She offered the address to go to only one place. There was nothing better than something sweet when the clouds were overhead. This was the best place in Garibos. It was apple pie. Someone-Chan didn't understand what it was. They had to raise their fighting spirit right now. Someone-Chan wasn't happy that there was no meat. A certain girl with a dissatisfied expression on her face nevertheless took a bite of the pie. She screamed as if from admiration, and she was shocked at how delicious it was. She called Ori a fraud and that she fed it to her to get to her brain. Ori said that she was right and sweets had one dangerous temptation. Because of the feeling of euphoria that it caused, the likelihood of eating too much increased, and this led to an increase in the area of the body over which the enemy could attack. But Henri, he said that nothing would happen to her if she didn't overeat and told her to eat normally. Henri thanked Ori-san. The Someone-Chan was lying on the floor and also thought that Ori wanted to get to her brain. Suddenly, Henri shouted at her to thank Ori. Nek-chan did so, but she cried and said that she didn't even suspect that there was something so delicious in this world. Oriya replied that there were still many other delicious things, including Nek-chan's favorite meat dishes. Someone, Tatiana asked about the food and how tasty it was. They bought a lot of food and someone Tyann ate it with both cheeks. Oriya thought that she owed Henri for saving the automatic knight, and as if they were on a date and went out to have a bite to eat. But it was more like they were babysitting something rather than a date. Child for Ori Nekto Tian was very funny. Anyway, Henri, someday, in order to save Elaret, he will be forced to make an inhuman decision. He wondered if there was any way to save a person whose body was taken over by another personality. Ori decided that it was better not to interrogate him now, and that it would be better for her to wait until he was ready to tell her everything himself. She answered him that it was unlikely that she had ever heard of such a thing. She let Henri look at the new dungeons that had been discovered in the capital. It was just a rumor, but she heard that the reward for completing it was a philosopher's stone, and with its help, it was possible to bring dead people back to life. But after all, it was a reward for completing a dungeon of the highest difficulty. Maybe it was the very miracle that could solve all those problems that were troubling Henri. Now, she didn't think that it could be an impossible task for him. If someone encountered difficulties, then it was necessary to raise the level, and if you put in the effort, you could get everything you wished for. Someone was already running with their hands full of meat. Henri, he realized that his problems had not gone away, but now he knew what he would do. He decided to start by getting the Philosopher's Stone and becoming stronger. For an adventurer who had gathered in the dungeon, ex-Henri looked completely inappropriate, and so Ori decided to give him a parting gift today. She wanted to give him a suit that cost 24,000 Els. Someone came out of the fitting room, screaming that some person was trying to put some clothes on her. Henri said that it suited her very well. Ori paid 48,000 Els. Henri was very embarrassed that she even had to buy clothes for someone. But if he continuously goes to dungeons and raises his level, he will have money in abundance. That's why she said not to worry about Henri's solvency high level. If you are treated, it was enough to simply express your gratitude and not ask for forgiveness. Henri never ceased to be amazed by the high-level adventurer. Suddenly, I noticed that his shield was broken. Henri said that he accidentally broke it from the monster, but it couldn't be because the golem's small shield was very strong and even she could only break it with strong magic. She became interested in who he encountered and how she could not worry in such a situation. Now they decided to go buy a shield. She came to some old man, and he said that he knew that he would find her here, and after all, they came here day after day to see Mr. Henri. Henri was interested in what they were talking about, and the old man asked not to be late. The old man hoped that now Henri would take care of the lady and how much the old man himself owed her. They went to buy a shield. Henri was glad that she looked after him so much, but there were more suitable places for him. But Ori was normal. She wanted to come here herself. The man gave Oriya a fist bump and said that she really hadn't made a mistake with the place. Henri thought about what to do, because on the one hand he wanted something better than the golem's small shield, but on the other hand, he didn't want to burden Oriya unnecessarily. He decided to pick something inexpensive, because he would still be able to dodge the enemy's attack if something happened. Someone Chan suggested to test the strength and told him to hold on tighter. She barely touched the shield, and suddenly the shield flew apart in different directions into pieces, and for everyone, it was incredible. Ori suspected that something was wrong here. Maybe she didn't have much strength, but she was still a high-level adventurer, and compared to a simple child, she should have much more strength. She couldn't understand who she was, and didn't understand what Henri had gotten himself into. She hoped that they could settle this quietly. The man was already crying. After all, he did all this with his own hands, and how could a child break this shield? He said that he didn't need money, and said that let this be a lesson to him. He shouted for someone Chan not to hold back and break everything that breaks. Henri and Orgi decided that now they will buy equipment here to somehow make amends. Someone Chan got a small turtle crystal shield with a strength of 160,000 and said that we need to take this one. Andre said that he would never forget what Ori did for him. He promised to definitely deal with it in the Dungeon X. To be honest, she also wanted to buy him weapons and armor, but she had things to do and so she had to run. They said goodbye. At the end, she shouted to become stronger together. They used to say goodbye like that, but now she had a feeling that this time they became a little closer, and Henri was wondering what kind of things she was talking about. It was good that she managed to meet Henri. She was also interested in why it was so pleasant to create that there are people ready to fight side by side with you. She also didn't understand why it gave her so much courage. A man in a cloak and a large bearded man stood near the gate. The man in the cloak and glasses was Eckhart from the Big Three, and the bearded man was George from the Big Three. Eckhart urgently called the Big Three, as Georg thought, but Eckhart thought that it was Georg who urgently called the Big Three. As it turned out, it was Guillermo. And none of them understood what this idiot was thinking about. They decided to quickly end it, and even though the meeting was urgent, it was not a fact that that girl would not interfere. She heard all this and told herself that the Schmeek family would be present since Garibos was in her possession. It was a city of adventurers, and it was they, the members of the Big Three, who had to decide its fate. The adventurers of this city were subordinate to one of the three clans, and the strongest a representative from each clan was its leader. Therefore, he was a member of the Big Three. The meeting of the Big Three was a meeting of adventurers which is carried out by adventurers in the interests of the adventurers themselves. But the interference of nobles in the affairs of the city is unnecessary. With the city under the control of the Big Three, there was corruption, slave trade, protection rackets, and robberies committed by low-level adventurers. Getting rid of the weak, that was the motto of this reign. Clan's Scarlet Brigade of Georg for clearing the dungeon, and demanded only one thing from adventurers: strength. And thought, if so, then why not recognize Mrs. Ori B., who herself distinguished herself as an adventurer until she was nicknamed the Witch of this city. Georg laughed and admitted that he caught him here. Less from the leader of the Dinero Guild, who only does what he does to protect the nobility and the rich, but Georg said with a furious look that he only recognizes those who are stronger than him, and he doesn't give a damn about the babble of weaklings. Ori, I agreed to do it his way. She promised to make them regret these words, and Georg replied that he would wait impatiently. But Eckhart asked to defeat him first, since Georg was going to raise his hand against the lady. The huge castle was too sophisticated a choice for a country bumpkin like Guillermo. After all, it was the best restaurant of the Dinero Guild. People always wanted to seem bigger than they were. It seems they were a little late. Eckhart asked Georg if he could explain to him what he was going to do, and if the restaurant's reputation would fall because someone like him had stepped over its threshold. Someone sipping from a glass said that it seemed they were not in the know. Georg said that they had not seen each other for a long time, and Eckhart did not think that he would return to this city. It was Valdemar, and he decided to share the information with those who adore this city, and whether to thank him or fall into despair was the choice of Georg and Eckhart. First, Someone-chan and Andri needed to find some housing. But only Ina. This will require a lot of money, Someone-chan asked. Are these the things that can be exchanged for meat or apple pie? Henri answered yes, and that's why they'll have to go to the dungeon again. Someone-chan got angry and shouted that he again intended to make Someone-chan drag somewhere. After all, he had just exchanged the sword for that money of his. She asked why he exchanged that sword. After all, it seems he had learned to wield a sword. But this sword was too heavy for Henri, and he couldn't even swing it. But even without it, the companion's sword had been very useful to him all this time. For him, this sword was like a synonym for income, and today, on the way to the city, he habitually went into the dungeon of Facile, but forgot that his shield was broken. There was nothing to do, and had to use the fatal blade, and only one hit was enough. And since he entered the reward zone after killing the boss, he will no longer be able to get the chest for the first passage. For Someone-chan, it was just a stick. But for Henri personally, it was the victory over the boss in the Facile dungeon that cost incredible efforts. But now this stage is past, the Frank dungeons are left behind, and now he wanted to try the Drank Ones dungeons. He was sure that you can earn much more there, but he didn't like them at all and reminded him of the other side. Henri asked him to be patient. Tatiana's nickname promised that when they find housing, he will buy to eat only meat, as much as she wants. Someone-chan wanted apple pie, and they quickly ran to the dungeon. A little boy was screaming for help. He ran up to some guy tugging at his cloak, explaining that his little brother had gone into a dungeon and hadn't returned, and he was only level 1. Suddenly the guy turned around screaming, "Get lost!" His fist flew straight into the little boy's face. Henri managed to grab the boy, lifting him up in his arms, thereby saving him from the blow. The boy was fine and uninjured, and that Henri said that he would save his brother. Georg and I were at the meeting of the Big Three Eckhart, but Guillermo didn't come. Waldemar said that while he was instead of Guillermo, suddenly Oria realized that he was the former leader of the Nameless clan, and he was in the Big Three before Guillermo. In Ice Humor knew that she was the daughter of a feudal lord, and it seems great that she also came to the meeting of the Big Three. Georg suggested that everyone sit down and that the Schmick family wouldn't mind hearing this either. Waldemar gathered everyone and asked if they could guess why he had called together those who had enough influence to control the adventurers. Eckhart suggested that he wanted to tell them about the major changes coming to the city. Today they had two topics on the agenda, and firstly he asked, who of those present was familiar with the sword? Suddenly Ori recognized the boss's sword in Trump's dungeon. Eckhart heard that the enemy was so strong that immediately after the countdown of the mistress, the road leading to the boss's chambers was blocked, and he did not understand how this could happen. Georg, of course, did not doubt that there were those who were ready to test fate, but he had not heard a report of anyone defeating him alone. Waldemar asked if they were ashamed to call themselves the Big Three after this. Waldemar had the sword, and now he decided to return to the first topic, that is, to the box with the item. After he defeated the boss, as a reward for the first playthrough, he received a prophecy tablet, on which the future of their city was written. Written there, that on the night when a bright star shines in the sky, a raid boss will descend on this city and bring with him death and destruction. If you count from today, then this will happen in about 2 months, and the raid boss will easily be able to destroy the entire country. If you do not fight him back, then the city will come to an end. But Georg and Eckhart thought whether it would be possible to defeat him by combining the efforts of the tourists of the entire city. But in order to unite all the adventurers, they needed the leader of the Nameless clan, namely Guillermo. But Guillermo was dead, as said Waldemar, and everyone was shocked. But he said it wasn't him, and Georg started shouting, "Don't be afraid, he died in some dungeon." Georg also suggested that maybe they were rotten, but still, the Big Three. And if he died in a dungeon, then why did Waldemar find out about it before everyone else? But Waldemar reminded that the raid boss is just around the corner and maybe they should talk about something more constructive. They returned to their topic, and according to the information he received after killing the boss, in about 2 months, a raid boss would appear in this city. And in order to survive this, they needed to unite the efforts of all the adventurers in this city. One of the members of the Big Three who controlled these adventurers was the leader of the Nameless clan, Guillermo, who is now missing. This greatly complicated the coordination of the adventurers. And this brought them to the second topic of today's discussion. Waldemar asked what to do with the brooch that was formed with Guillermo's death. Georg asked if they could count on Waldemar's help. But he answered no, and were they seriously going to beg for help from the one who abandoned this city? He asked to do it somehow without him. Eckhart asked what Seneda was respected, even by the most gifted adventurers of the Nameless class, and he also had very high potential in terms of leadership and intellectual qualities. Georg did not think that this was a good idea, and there were bad rumors about him. Georg shouted that Zephyrkun was a great option. He was the strongest swordsman in the Nameless clan, and Georg once heard that he surpassed even Guillermo in this. But Eckhart replied that he was not suitable either, and that he was only interested in his own strength, and that they needed someone who could lead the clan. They thought about who else could be suitable, but Eckhart remembered that Habener went crazy on the battlefield, and as he understood, anyone who belonged to the Nameless clan could become its leader. But usually the strongest leader of the clan became the leader, and in this case, Orias suggested Henri in this role. But they both answered that now was not the time for jokes, and Waldemar ended the meeting. But suddenly, Waldemar cried out that they had forgotten that this is a city of adventurers. And so he proposed to match the image and make a decision consistent with the wild nature of adventurism. Georg suggested holding tournament that will determine the strongest in the Nameless clan. Everyone who wants to take a place in the Big Three should participate, and let those who know their business fight for this title until their last breath. And whoever remains alive will become the new and undisputed leader of the Nameless clan, and the new member of the Big Three. Suddenly, someone's face changed, and she asked what was wrong with her. Someone suddenly ran and hid in the corner, and everything was exactly like that time. Someone-chan was shaking all over, and she was also sweating. Someone-chan asked not to touch her. Her forehead was very cold, and Henri did not understand what to do. But whatever it was, he had to do something. Suddenly, someone from the big house shouted to replace him, and the man with the mohawk said that he was bursting with the desire to create. He went to the workshop, and for probably 10 years he had not been so fired up by work as now. And all because that girl broke his shields. With these very hands, he decided to make the most durable weapon in the world, be it drags or something else. He set this goal for himself at the very beginning of his journey, and even his blood boiled in his veins. If he managed to create durable equipment, then he could at least be useful to Aniray, and still someone Chan was something. Of course, he was already used to the fact that in this city you shouldn't judge strength by appearance, but he admitted that he even liked how easily she broke his shields. He decided that he would have to thank her somehow, and suddenly Aniray, with someone on his back, shouted, "Uncle!" He asked if he had a random place where someone could rest in peace. Besides him, Aniray had no one else to rely on, and the man asked, "What a stupid question," and of course allowed it. His house was very close, they had already arrived home, and Aniray had put someone to bed in the bedroom, this uncle's beloved. Someone wrapped herself in a blanket and sat with a frightened look. They started asking someone what happened to her, but she started stuttering, when suddenly she screamed to be left alone. And did she ask to be looked after? She screamed for him to save that brat. The big three ruled this city, and therefore only strong adventurers could enjoy it. Uncle decided that they would do something different, that there was no need to worry about anything, and his darling would be at home who would look after a certain Chan. Aniray agreed and said that he would try to return as quickly as possible. Until then, he asked someone to take care of him, someone Tyann. She said that she's been a little off her rocker lately and that she's completely lost her mind. But she's a raid boss, and the meaning of her existence is the destruction of humanity. She said that they got her, and repeated again that she wanted to be alone. Suddenly, a little girl carefully looked into her room. Someone, Chan, didn't look like a raid boss, but rather she looked like a normal child because she was so happy. OAO Aniray had a bad feeling, and he needed to get it over with quickly and go back. Aniray came to the difficulty level E, that is, to the dungeon of Banero. According to that boy, his brother should be somewhere there, and the level of this dungeon was 32. This dungeon was formed in the spreading roots of a giant tree. For frank adventurers to pass this dungeon was not easy, considering how deep and winding its passages were. And Aniray did not understand what a level 1 adventurer was doing here. Finding him alone was not easy, and Aniray did not even imagine how he should look for him. He came across a magic stone. After killing a monster, its corpse disappears and a drop falls out of it. For adventurers, this item was simply priceless, and for its sake, people went down into the dungeon. But this one just lay on the surface, and Aniray thought whether it was worth picking it up. There were magic stones scattered everywhere, but no one ever collected them. It was the same as if there was money scattered there, and it was hard to even imagine. Aniray the First assumed that high-level adventurers who had enough money already passed through here. Those who passed through here clearly had no time for that. Aniray decided to find out where these stones would lead him, and he hoped that this boy would be okay. He hoped that the boy said that his brother had thick black hair and an earring in his left ear, and that his only equipment was an axe and a shield. This brother was attacked by a huge rooster, and it was a cockatrice. The recommended level should have been 30, and this brother was only 1. He didn't have a single chance to beat it. Synod appeared, and he said that he would not help him anymore, but if the boy was so stupid that he was not able to understand the first time, then that was his problem. He was surprised what kind of adventurers there are these days, and when he was level 1, he fought with monsters and stronger. The boy was not in the mood for dialogue now, and the master told him to fight like it was the last time. The boy understood that if he tried to escape, then the master would deal with him. He didn't understand how he got into this. Real growth was only possible when you defeat an opponent who was superior to you in strength and level. The gentleman shouted, "That's how he became stronger," which meant that even a boy could do it. The boy broke his arm and leg to pieces, and he already thought that he was finished, and that he was a corpse. He thought that he would not survive this. The boy was already lying there, all crippled and broken. The gentleman shouted at him to get up and take his axe, but the boy said he couldn't fight anymore and he had had enough. The gentleman asked, "Does he mean to say that he is a dog with his tail between his legs?" The boy answered that yes, he is a dog. He screamed that he was a weak and pathetic dog, and that's why he asked him to help. He screamed that he didn't want to die, and sadness and tears appeared on the gentleman's face. He thought how wonderful it was for weaklings to beg for salvation, and every time he saved some monster, he was filled with a sense of self-worth. The aniray bursts into this battle using its fatal blade. He lifted the boy and said that everything was fine and he had come to save him. He shouted for the boy to hold on, and now he would give him a potion. Suddenly, the gentleman tried to calm down and told himself to pull himself together, because it was not becoming for a true gentleman to show his emotions. Anger inside him, and he wanted to finish off this brat because he had deprived him of catharsis, the pleasure of his life. Henri managed to do it, and suddenly the gentleman recognized Henri with admiration. He asked him if he was that same Henri, the first-level prisoner, to which Henri answered yes. The gentleman smiled, and there was even a heart in his eye. He confessed to Henri that he was his fan. After all, Henri was a young man with an unsuccessful dodge skill, and he was incredibly curious about what kind of adventurer he would become with such an unusual, rare skill. His whole life's goal was to raise the most capable adventurers of the first level, and he was a first-level collector. Adventurers recognized by everyone and himself. He introduced himself to Henri and asked for forgiveness in advance for his tutelary ambitions. He said that if he had only been in Guillermo's group, he would have immediately taken Henri under his wing. It seemed that the gentleman was not aware that Guillermo was no longer alive, and Henri had a feeling that he was the last one who needed to know about it. Henri decided not to mess with him and went with the boy on his back, but suddenly the gentleman said to him, "Wait a minute." He asked where he was going to carry the boy and Henri. He replied that it seemed like he was asked to save him, but Mr. Mila said that this was not right, and that he couldn't just take away his comrade. But Henri, with an angry expression on his face and a shout, asked why he himself didn't help him then. But the gentleman admired how charming Henri's face was when he was angry. The gentleman replied that it was part of his upbringing, and if a person spoiling him won't make him a strong adventurer. After all, strictness gave rise to hope, and this kid had the skill of mastering magic. Mastering magic was a skill necessary for handling magic, and without it, the boy would not be able to use any magic. Many adventurers tried to find a way to master this skill, but they never found it, and this meant that this skill could only be obtained from our forest of ancestors. But then there were adventurers who discovered this skill after registering with the church. The boy had this skill of wielding weapons, and he was strong, and plus he had mastery of magic. This young man, in the opinion of the master, should have become incredibly strong. This boy was his most promising possession at the moment. The gentleman said, why on earth would some stranger raise him, his own protege? Henri sent him away, and what the hell kind of upbringing? Andre himself had suffered from Guillaume in his time, but at least he had an evasion, and Henri felt terribly sorry for the boy. When Henri got here, the boy's condition was already worse than ever. If it weren't for the evasion, then God knows what would have happened. At this rate, he might not last long. Henri decided to return it to his younger brother, but the master said that it would not do. The gentleman was level 89, and when you get to such a level, it becomes very difficult to raise it further. Gentleman said that the gentleman went to dungeons day after day, destroying enemy after enemy, and the level never rose. Then you think, what if you stop developing? As the gentleman thought, he also said that at such moments, memories of the time when the level was low always popped up in his head. It was an incredible feeling of continuous leveling up, and it is an incomparable feeling that you are becoming stronger. And all that the gentleman did was satisfy this hunger by raising newcomers. And if Henri decided to interfere with this modest joy in his life, the gentleman was saying that he would not even look at the fact that he was Henri, when suddenly Henri and this boy had already disappeared. They were already heading for the exit, and Henri was thinking what nonsense the gentleman was talking, and it was impossible to even listen to him. All the gentleman did was satisfy his personal desires, but he didn't care about raising adventurers. Henri was sure that someday this boy would become strong and he wouldn't let the gentleman destroy him. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Henri noticed a dagger flying right next to his head. It was Sir. He moved straight to the dagger, and it was teleportation. Sir decided that Henri was very confident in his modest reserve of agility and was not afraid to think that he could escape thanks to his speed. The gentleman reminded that he was a high-level adventurer and immediately apologized and said that a very fast rat should be punished. Something had to happen, because this was the depths of the dungeon and she had to be somewhere here. Henri had to make it. It was useless to run, and he decided to use dodge. But his dodge didn't work. As it turned out, the dodge was only activated if the one using it was attacked. But the target of this attack was not him. The gentleman threw the dagger into the ground, and suddenly the analyzes panicked. His body did not move at all. Henri ran away from the master to the boss's room. But to avoid clashes between groups, the entrance to the boss's quarters was closed until those who entered there earlier will not finish the battle. Apparently, Henri intended to use the magic circle that is in the room with the reward, and how pictorial it was. However, the gentleman had no doubt that Henri would be able to defeat the boss first. With an adventurer level on his shoulders, the boss inside this room could only be defeated by a group of several people, where everyone was responsible for their role. The gentleman thought that the conversation would certainly be different if Henri had someone like him with him, and since he did not raise his level after killing the enemy, it meant that he was no longer level 1, or, although it didn't make any difference to him anyway, he was probably already dead. It was stupid to cling to something so incredible, and the gentleman decided not to dwell on the past. The gentleman said, "Bring the suitcase to the studio." He put his hand in the suitcase and told someone to get out and not run away. He grabbed the black-haired girl by the head, and she screamed that she didn't want to fight anymore. She was already standing on the ground and shaking, also screaming for him to get away from her and let her go. He got a couple more boys and told them to decide who would be his next student. One of the boys asked what happened to Tito-kun, but the gentleman remained silent. Suddenly, the gentleman said that Tito-kun had finished his training, and he had become so strong that he was unrecognizable. He suggested that they try too, and maybe they could finish the training, and that was the attitude he needed. He told them to try hard and they would become excellent high-level adventurers. If they eventually die, they are even worse than they were before, and worse than even the most mediocre adventurers. They greatly disappointed the gentleman. Suddenly, Henri asked, "Can we get through here quickly?" Tito's father and Rito were already standing over him. Tito had already woken up and could not believe that he had been saved. Besides that, they had nothing to thank Henri with, and gave him a whole basket of bread. Henri wanted to convince him to leave the gentleman's group once everything settled down, but now he didn't even know where to start the conversation. Suddenly, Tito himself said that he was getting involved in adventurism. But suddenly, Henri said that he has a very cool skill of using magic, and Tito replied that he became an adventurer only to anger his father. And he also thought that he could easily make some money on this. But he didn't want to experience something like that again, and yet to be an adventurer, you had to have a strong determination. He was amazed how Henri managed to stay so calm and fight those monsters. Tito told his father that he would continue his business. Suddenly his father burst into tears and told Henri that he would never repay this debt. But Henri said that he hadn't done anything like that. Father continued to shout that he had done something and that he wasn't like the others. He had been watching this city for a long time, and they all just made fun of the difficulties of other adventurers and used them as a snack for their drinks. If someone like Henri was in the big three, this city would be much better. He also said that if he needed to buy bread, he could definitely go to them, and they would serve him first class. Tito, of course, was afraid of his father, no less than monsters, but he also wanted to try to learn how to bake excellent bread. In order to save his sister, Henri needed to become stronger as quickly as possible, but he wondered if he should close his eyes to those in trouble because of this. He decided that he shouldn't, and what's the point of strength if he gives up his humanity for his sister? The sister herself would be against it, and Henri wanted to be a brother for her that she could be proud of when she returned. Mr. Sinad did not know whether he realized the full gravity of the crimes he had committed, and whether there was anyone to whom he wanted to proudly show his current self. If he didn't have such a person, then he sincerely felt sorry for him. Oriya-san covered Henri's eyes with her palms and asked him to guess who it was. Henri guessed it, and it was obvious to him. Henri thought that she was behaving somehow strangely. Henri wanted someone saved. That's why he needed the Philosopher's Stone. That's why he wanted to become strong enough to go to the Dungeon X. Although it was dangerous. But what he wouldn't do if she said that there were rumors in the city about a way that could make you the strongest. Henri was. I wonder what came over her, and suddenly she asked if she could hold his hand. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to say it normally, for Henri found it strange because she always expressed everything without any doubts. But he allowed her to take his hand. She warned that what she was about to say would be half for his sake, but the other half was solely her selfishness. But it was not just selfishness, but probably the most selfish thing she had ever done. She said said that today she was at a meeting of the Big Three. She said that they were talking about a tournament that would determine the strongest in a nameless clan, and the raid boss was literally breathing down their necks. That's why it was necessary to decide who would take a place in the Big Three in order to unite the adventurers. She stuttered and asked if he would like to try. Henri reasoned that the raid boss was a monster, to defeat which it was necessary to coordinate the actions of a huge number of groups. If he could still be defeated, he would receive a large amount of experience and a rare item of the SSR rank. But all this was distributed, depending on the contribution, and therefore it was necessary to bring adventurers into battle, as a member of the Big Three. She said that if Henri really intended to go to Dungeon X, then of course he needed a level, but it would not be superfluous to acquire rare items. She said that depending on his contributions, the rarity of the item would change, and therefore I thought that it would be better for him to join the Big Three in order to increase this very contribution. That was the choice if Henri wanted to become stronger, and so they said, in any case. Now she decided to move on to the selfish part. She said that even if you forget that she is the daughter of the owner of these lands, she still loved this city. As a child, all she did was read different books in the dungeons, and all the literature was incredibly interesting for her. In it you could learn, for example, about the weaknesses of monsters and how to pass the dungeon, or entangled treasures, or how to get weapon materials, and she was delighted just from reading. In this city, as if from the supporters of those books that captured her, Henri the First thought that I understood her, but only those who have influence in this tournament. It was Synod. It was a man with whom something was clearly wrong, and there seemed to be bad rumors about him. Then Zephyr, who thought about nothing except how to become stronger, was the strongest in the nameless clan, and finally Habener, this girl who blew the roof off on the battlefield. And as everyone said, they are terribly strong, and even if she had taken part, it is quite possible that they would have rolled over her with a steamroller. All strong adventurers had a couple or other features. But Aurea did not. She wanted these cruel, selfish people to continue to commit atrocities in this city. She wanted it to be Henri. She squeezed his hand and thought that he was probably in shock because she asked him to take such a risk, convincing him to take part in this tournament. Suddenly, Henri pulled his hand out from under hers. She thought, Henri thinks that she is a monster for talking here about other people's egoism, but she herself. But Henri took her hand again, which surprised her. Henri smiled at her. Henri said that if it made him strong enough to go to the Dungeon X, who saw no reason to refuse. And besides, he himself grew up in this city. The city would be much better if someone like him was in the Big Three. But the truth is, he wasn't sure that he could handle what she asked him to do. But she started to support Henri and say that he definitely could. Waldemar's son landed right in front of them. He already understood that Henri heard everything. He remembered that he promised to prepare everything, and he arranged everything. And as he said, judging by his face, Henri looks like... Already made up his mind, Henri cried out that he would take a place in the Big Three.